This is the meeting of the West Hartford Public Schools Board of Education. And Cammie, can you start with the roll call, please?
Ms. Aronson?
Present.
Dr. Chang?
Present.
Ms. Poland?
Present.
Dr. Steinberg?
Here.
Dr. Thomas Farquharson?
Here.
Ms. Wilcox?
Here.
Mr. Zdanowitz?
Here.
Thank you. And Dr. Chang, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
And we're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance in honor of Representative John Lewis, his dedication to our country, fight for peace and justice. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible,
with
liberty
and
justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do not have a revision to the agenda order. Before we continue, our community experienced a tragedy over the past week. And on behalf of the board, I want to express condolences to the family and friends of Johnny Benjamin Adams, a recent graduate of King Philip Middle School. Our thoughts are with all of who knew Johnny. Please know that there is a box set up at King Philip if you'd like to leave a condolence card or a memory for the family. You can do so by leaving that in the box, which will be available from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. this week and next week. This is another tragedy for our community, and I hope our community will rally its support on behalf of Johnny's loved ones. And I'd ask for a moment of silence, please. Thank you. With no student participation, we will move on to public comments. As a reminder for members of the public, we take public comments 3 minutes per individual and 21 minutes per subject. Board members do not respond to comments, though I suspect you may receive some answers to any questions or concerns you raised during the reports this evening. We will also have a public comment period at the end of our meeting this evening. We did receive many emails as well, and I know not everyone is able to call in this evening, but please know that the board members have received your comments and will take them under consideration and give them serious consideration. So without further ado, I guess I'll just ask people to chime in or who wants to go first. Oh, and if you're watching online, Cammie will hold up a yellow card when you have 1 minute remaining and a red card when your time has expired. All right.
What happens if they come in for a phone call then?
I will let you know when you have, I'll let you know when time's up if you are not watching online. Thank you for that question. Okay. Somebody can just go ahead and go first. When you provide your comments, please state your name and your address.
Hi, good evening. My name is Keisha Ansar.
Good evening. You can go ahead. Start with your
Oh,
address, please, and then you can begin your comment.
Thank you. My address is 107 Richard Street in West Hartford, and my son is a recent graduate of Conard High. So I'm just going to give a brief synopsis of something that occurred last year. Last August, my son Tyreek and his friend were doing fundraising after their football workout in West Hartford. They had on their clear pack jerseys that identified them as Conard football players. They went to a home and one of the residents called her husband, who is a detective, and told him that she's terrified because someone came to the door. It was later found out that she is an actual detective that is trained to combat multiple assailants. However, she was supposedly terrified because two teenage Black boys knocked on her door and then walked away. Some people, in trying to justify the officer's actions, are dwelling on the time of day. However, it was during the summer and it was still light out. And more importantly, the time of day is irrelevant as their civil rights were violated. Hartford PD would like us to believe that the wife did not know the boy's race. So how did the vigilante detective and followers know that they were supposed to go directly to the boys? If you read the report, you'll see that the SUV drove past them and then immediately made a U-turn and went to them. Superintendent Moore, I emailed you several times in 2019 to inform you of the harassment and updates. You responded with encouraging words, and so I'm surprised that you have been absent in this fight for justice. I sent you an update about the unjust determination on June 16th, and this email has remained unanswered. You do have an obligation to inform the parents of West Hartford of the policies that you plan to put in place to protect our children, as these boys were acting as ambassadors to your school when the harassment occurred. And it was brought to my attention last night that there are many instances of where Hartford PD actually violated West Hartford residents. One such instance was mentioned on the Hartford City Council meeting last night. In 2018, Sergeant Barone and other officers of Hartford PD crossed over into West Hartford and were caught on camera kicking a man that was already handcuffed. My question is, why is this a constant reoccurrence, and what measures do our leaders plan to put in place to stop this violation? You all have a responsibility to publicly denounce the Hartford police officers and make it known that such actions will never be acceptable in West Hartford. Only then will they respect and recognize the values that our city stands for.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Are there other people who wish to comment?
Yes.
Hi, good evening.
Oh, hello?
Yes,
Hi,
the number ending in 23.
Yes, hi, this is Tricia. Good evening, my name is Tricia Pitter. I live at 26 Greenbrier Drive, and I am one of the EDI parent leaders at Aiken Elementary School. On August 7, 2019 in Arizona, 4 young Black boys aged 15 and 16 were going door to door fundraising for their school when they were met by a 46-year-old white woman with a revolver. We may think this was a one-time racial incident and could never happen in our town, but clearly it did. Although Tyreek and his friend weren't met with the same fate as the other 4 young Black boys, they do share a similar emotional response to the event that took place, fear and trauma. As a district, there needs to be better protocols and practices in place to protect our students, especially students of color. Because in this situation, to be Black and male is to be seen as a threat without justice and equity. Therefore, I am asking that the West Hartford Board of Ed, while reviewing and updating your policies, institute a moratorium of all student fundraising activities until the following is addressed. Update policy on soliciting of funds from and by students to ensure that safety and protections are established, especially for BIPOC students. Establish the formation of a school district-wide task force that includes BIPOC parents, mental health, and public safety professionals to review and recommend changes to school board policies to address race-related trauma resulting from school district program activities and practices. I emailed further information about the West Hartford Board of Ed earlier today along with this testimony. Update policy on public complaints. Now, I understand that there is a chain of command for this. However, in a matter as serious as Tyreek and his friends, it should not take 11 months, 349 days, and approximately 50 weeks and counting for Ms. to get a phone call from Superintendent. This is unacceptable and should never happen again. The response time has to be immediate. To make sure our students of color are protected and safe, anti-racism practices and protocols need to be embedded throughout West Hartford Board of Education policies. It's time to support and make big solutions in order to make the needed cultural and systemic changes that dismantle the inequities that exist. We can no longer justify and be okay with policies that continue to strip the basic human rights of our students. We are at a critical moment in time, so how we act is important, and there should be no regrets. Thus, it is imperative to be proactive and not reactive when bad things happen. Thank you so much for your attention and your time.
Thank you. Who would like to go next?
Hello.
Hi. The number
Hi.
ending in 65. Go for it.
Hi, my name is Natalie De La Cruz. I live at 8 Ridgebrook Drive, and I'm a rising junior at Connors. I would like to start off by thanking you and all other officials who have worked to create the plan for the academic year that is being introduced tonight. However, I strongly believe that the student voice has not been involved enough in the creation of the plans. In fact, my peers agree. I created a poll on social media where I asked, do you think students have been included enough in creating the reopening plan for this year? End quote. And of the 100 students that I verified will be attending a WHCS school this fall, 95 said that they do not feel included enough in the making of the plan you're unveiling tonight. Students' lives are at risk, and too many of us have not been asked our opinion or given the chance to help guide the plan. Students are more than capable of providing valuable advice, as we are the ones that know how our peers act and react, and we are the ones actually attending the classes. There's a survey sent out at the end of the academic year looking for feedback, and there was a survey that was for parents to fill out for their children's intentions for the fall. That is simply not enough. I'm a member of many community and school advocacy groups, such as the Safe School Climate Committee, and yet no one has asked our opinion. I personally do not feel comfortable going back to school because I know that a plan that does not adequately address the needs of students, as told by students, is destined to backfire. Of course, this is not one person or group's fault, but this needs to be addressed immediately in the next phase of implementing the plan. There needs to be an open line of communication between a large majority of students and those making the decisions that impact our health and safety. Principal Duarte did an amazing job of this. Every Thursday during online learning, he sent out updates, and teachers were encouraged to talk to students about their experiences with distance learning. As you all know, there are usually student representatives on this board, but as they're both seniors, they graduated and retired from this position. That means that there is 0 student representation on the Board of Ed currently. I asked students if they had something to add to my statement, and here's what I received. Bella, a rising junior at Hall, says emailing a couple of options for school to students could help so that we know what to expect. Ava, a rising junior at Connors, says give students updates on the plans, not just our parents. Avery, a rising senior at Connors, says students, especially high school students, need to have a say. Lastly, Bridget, a rising senior at Hall, says we need more mental health support for students, especially for online class, and wants to know if there's a plan for that. I couldn't agree more with Bridget's sentiment. As a member of the West Hartford Prevention Council, I care an immense amount about mental health, and with the impact of the fight for racial justice on students of color, the uncertainty that this pandemic has brought upon everyone, on top of normal stressors, mental health support needs to significantly expand this year. Students deserve a seat at the decision-making table. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Who would like to go next?
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Amelia Frangel, and I live at 64 Vine Hill Road, and I have a daughter at KP. I would like to share my concerns regarding the start of the school year. My daughter, Anne-Marie, who will be entering the 6th grade, was diagnosed with sickle cell disease at birth. Throughout her life, she has been sickly and has been hospitalized every 3 to 4 months for sickle cell crises. For the sake of time, I will not explain what her condition is. I can only ask that when you have the time, you will take the responsibility of educating yourself regarding this, because ultimately there is someone in your community living with it. Anne-Marie's condition puts her at high risk and makes her prone to getting sick because her immune system is very weak. Not only does she have this chronic condition that lowers her hemoglobin and requires her to get frequent blood transfusions, but she also has asthma. I have already made the decision to transition to virtual learning because the beginning of every school year is the hardest time for her. And now adding the concerns of COVID-19, I cannot and will not risk my child's health and life during a time that is still unknown. I am furious that as a parent with a child that has special needs and has been on a 504 plan for the last 7 years, that I am being forced to make a decision blindly because no one has reached out to me specifically or even as a group to let me know what the possibilities and/or options will be for the fall. You want me to tell you if I'm sending my child to school or not, but how can I make that decision if I do not know what that will look like? My daughter, who was mentioned before, has been hospitalized every 3 to 4 months since birth. She has not been sick or in the hospital for the last 7 months. For us, that is remarkable. That has to speak for something. The distancing we have been practicing is proving to be beneficial. Another issue that is concerning is that of transportation. Coming from Smith, a town magnet school, we made the decision for Anne-Marie to attend KP because familiarity is important. I want her to feel safe and empowered among her friends that she already knows and who know her condition. After receiving a call from transportation, I am yet again being forced to make a decision because of the little time there has been to properly devise a plan that will benefit all. We are not in KP district, and because of social distancing requirements, there will no longer be a bus to transport non-district children to school. Although I can appreciate being able to make the decision for my child to learn virtually, I cannot help but feel that we are being discriminated against. We are told that the choice is ours, but we don't even know if there is going to be a difference between a voluntary online learner and a child that involuntarily has to be home for online learning due to a health condition. You're saying that you will be inclusive of children with special needs, that there will be a place for them, but how are they not being discriminated against when they have to sit at home and be isolated from their friends who don't have health concerns and are back in school? It is unfair to make my child feel singled out because of her health. In closing, I want to state that in a perfect world, I would not choose for my child to stay home and learn virtually, but I feel like this is the best option. Definitely better than being in a hospital with no other support, and much better than having to bury my child. Thank you for your time. Good evening.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment?
Hi, I would like to.
All right, go for it.
My name is Greta Murdock, and I'm a resident at 33 Glen Hollow and a rising senior at Hall High School. As a member of Hall's community, I strongly believe that the approach to this reopening must be an inclusive and supportive one. As we all know, COVID has forced students and teachers alike to adjust in a multitude of ways. Attending virtual office hours, communicating solely via computer, and even taking AP exams online undeniably impacted students. Hall implemented weekly meetings by grade level in order to spread information with as little confusion as possible. Information was presented regarding the SATs, report card releases, Google Classroom updates, and even time management. I believe that these sessions need to continue throughout the school year in order to keep students informed and comfortable. I would also like to strongly advocate for the importance of smaller meetings in order to support students emotionally. Social isolation proved difficult for almost all of my peers. Although essential to maintain the physical health of the community as a whole, quarantine had a detrimental impact for many of my peers. Continuing to hold advisory meetings will ensure that each student meets with a smaller group of peers and a teacher on a consistent basis. Making the advisory schedule as invariable as possible will aid students in developing stronger relationships with their advisor and fellow advisees. Hosting roundtable discussions within advisories may help advisors to gauge the emotional state of students regarding different topics. For example, Hall's, quote, Real Talk for Warriors, end quote, surrounding the Black Lives Matter movement, which broke participants into smaller groups of 5 to 10 students and 2 to 3 faculty members. Dealing with tough situations and topics as a community should absolutely become a priority during this reopening. Not only will students become more informed, they will feel more supported and heard by their school system as a whole. Lastly, including students more deeply in decision-making is essential. Many of my peers have expressed confusion, distress, and frustration about the school year to come. Surveying students about their thoughts surrounding the coming year may not only make us feel listened to, but may present you all with more ideas on how to make this reopening go more smoothly. As a group of bright and mature students, we hope that you will take our ideas and feelings into consideration throughout the school year to come. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Would you like to go next?
Hi, this is Kathy Ryanstar.
Hi, Kathy. Go.
Kathy Ryanstar, 113 Washington Circle. I am a proud parent of a third grader and incoming pre-K 3 student at Charter Oak, and I'm a graduate of Duffy, Sedgwick, and Conard High Schools. I am a white parent who desperately wants my children to be taught to live in the multicultural world that we live in and to end white supremacy. And so I come to you as part of the equity, diversity, and inclusion team that's working town-wide. And I want to introduce some of what we've been working on that many of you know and some of you don't. And then there are several other speakers who are going to speak to specific points. We have EDIs at 7 elementary schools, and we are networked and working with parents in informal and formal ways at all 3 middle schools and both high schools. We coordinate with Community of Concern and with WASCO. At the beginning of this month, we sent a letter to Superintendent Moore asking for a meeting to talk about some issues we've been raising around equity for a long time. Board members and Superintendent Moore received this email about people of color parents being on the newly formed committees about reopening, about expanding conversations about safety and social and emotional impacts to include plans for keeping Black, Indigenous, and people of color children protected from racist harassment, improving practices around parent communications, and probably most importantly, working towards an equity policy and equity audit in our district. We want to thank Rosina Haskins for meeting with us. We really, really appreciate that and all of her work. And we know this job is not hers alone. We want to also thank Deb Pollen and Amanda Aronson for meeting with us on behalf of all of the board members. Thank you for committing to meet with us on a regular basis throughout the year. And we are eager for you, together with the administration, to move forward on equity and engagement with families, in particular at the margins. Superintendent Moore, we are eager to meet with you. I know as a leader, I am a minister right now, that these times are just absolutely zany, and we really, really appreciate all the work that you all are doing and know it's almost impossible. And it's in the most zany times that our priorities come forth. So for me as a minister, after George Floyd was killed, I dropped a lot of the things I was doing and showed up on the streets, showed up with my Black congregants and leaders, and turned the tables upside down. So Superintendent Moore, we look forward to meeting with you in this zany time, because if we don't put equity forward as the top priority right now, we will continue to fail our students of color. We will continue to fail our white students. We will continue to fail our community when there is so much potential and there is so much in motion, and we want to encourage you all into that motion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Who would like to go next?
Hi, I would. Hello, my name is Nadia Ketchuah. I live on 118 Brunswick Avenue, and I am the mother to a 7th grader at Sedgwick and a 9th grader at Conard. I became involved with the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion group after attending the Family and Schools Partnership meeting with the EDI and Rosina Haskins in the beginning of this year. Given everything that has transpired so far in 2020, I understand that the district has no easy task in creating a reopening plan for our schools. This plan will affect the entire community, namely teachers, staff and administrators, parents, and students. As a single parent and a parent of color to 2 children in our schools, I have many concerns with how our schools will open in the fall. I am here today to ask that the district involve a diverse group of parents and students in their process for reopening schools. We not only need to look at safety with COVID, we need to consider equity in education, both inside a physical classroom and with virtual learning possibilities, and consider the emotional well-being of our students during a time when they have been greatly impacted by a pandemic and acts of racism that have divided our communities across the country. Tom Moore made a very strong statement to the West Hartford community about being actively anti-racist moving forward during his time as superintendent. I am hopeful that process has already begun. I read on the WHPS website that there are a number of advisory committees that are helping to strategize as we move towards opening in the fall. However, this process has seemed to be closed to the community. As parents and members of the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion groups, we want to be sure that BIPOC parent and student voices are represented on these committees. As we move towards unknown territory, it is so important that the needs of all the students are being considered. How will we ensure there is equity for all students? How will we deal with students coming together after months of being apart, hearing their families, different interpretations of the pandemic, as well as different interpretations of the senseless killings of Black men and women across the nation? How will we ensure that our students are not only safe from COVID, but feel safe in their skin and able to express their views on the current political climate? Will there be social emotional resources such as counselors, small support groups, etc., for students to utilize if things are difficult for them? These are just some of the questions I have as we move forward. And as a parent who is starting to get more involved in our school system, I hope that the equity, diversity, and inclusion groups will have an opportunity to meet with Tom Moore to share our concerns and ideas. Now is a time that as a community, we need to be open-minded to new and creative possibilities as we enter an unknown time in public education. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Giga Bellen. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, thank you. I live at 31 Brennan Road in West Hartford, and I have 4 biracial kids, 1 at Bristow and the other 3 at Brayburn School. A couple of years ago, I co-founded a parent-led equity, diversity, and inclusion group at my children's elementary school. And that's where my volunteer work on equity in schools began. And within the past year or so, as more of these grassroots groups began at other schools, parents at all levels have begun to work together and pool resources and efforts to work together on equity initiatives that would work with all parents throughout West Hartford. Together, as Kathy Ryan had pointed out before, we are part of the West Hartford EDI parent group, and we had indicated before that we would like to meet with Superintendent Moore to discuss important equity issues and would still really like to do so. At the beginning of June, Superintendent Moore sent out a statement to the West Hartford community. It was a promise about West Hartford Public Schools being actively anti-racist moving forward in thoughts and actions and professional development. And as someone who is passionate about equity in education and diversity in curriculum, this is a good thing, and I can't wait to hear more, but we need more than just a promise. We need to hear more about what actions will be taken and what results the district will be looking for to make good on this promise. And in order to effectively document progress, we need an equity audit. So we need the board and Superintendent Moore to lead on equity by making an equity audit and a district-wide anti-racist equity and education policy a priority. When we had reached out to Superintendent Moore to meet with us, we understand he is very super busy during this crazy time, and he directed us to meet with the Director of Diversity Advancement, Dr. Rosina Haskins. And we did have the opportunity to meet with her recently, and we consider ourselves so fortunate to have her on our side and to work with her and collaborate as we did with the Family School Partnership Series kickoff at the beginning of the year. And we appreciate her partnership and her support. However, I want to stress that equity is not just for one department to deal with. An equity lens should be used in all areas of West Hartford Public Schools, in curriculum and in administration, professional development, budget, hiring, nurturing, and retention of teachers, even in student-centered equity initiatives. So in almost every context, it is the superintendent who has the ability to advance or hinder EDI work. And it is not enough to leave it to the Department of Diversity Advancement to hire well and to expect them, or in this case, one amazing woman, to do the daily work. So we look forward to the opportunity to meet with Superintendent Moore soon. We greatly appreciate the Board of Ed taking the time to meet with us recently, and we look forward to more productive conversations around equity in schools. And thank you to the board, Superintendent Moore, and the West Hartford Public School Administration for all your hard work and efforts during these past few months. It does not go unnoticed. And I just wanted to extend a warm welcome to Dr. Jason Oliver Chang to the board. I am personally thrilled to know that you'll be part of this important decision-making body, bringing with you your background and knowledge around equity and diversity to our community. So can't wait to see more. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there others who wish to speak?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Nakia Alexander. I am a mom of 2 boys, one entering into the 6th grade in the fall, and my youngest one is entering into the fall at KP, and my youngest one is at Norfolk going into the 3rd grade. My address is 2 Beacon Hill Drive. So my comment tonight is more of a series of questions that I have pertaining to the recently formed reopening advisories, and I am aware the form does not allow for you to respond. My understanding is that there are 5 reopening advisory committees: health and safety, curriculum, instruction, assessment, social and emotional impacts, community outreach, and employee workplace safety. And it is also my understanding that these advisory groups, consisting of parents and administrators, are essentially tasked with developing a plan and a blueprint for kids and teachers to be able to return to school safely in the fall. So my questions are centered around the policies and practices the district is using to form these committees and advisory groups. So for instance, what is the racial makeup of each committee? Given that the population of students is 40% non-white, are those committees reflective of our diverse community? And did the chairs of the committees ensure that all voices are being heard? What was the process for outreach? Were people of color proactively asked to be a part of the advisory groups? What equity framework or lens was used, if any, by members as they evaluated and discussed plans for reopening to ensure those plans will work for all students? If an equity framework was utilized, did it take into account all of the distinct cultures and backgrounds, experiences, and learning styles of all students, and particularly students of color, to make sure they feel safe and supported as they re-enter school in the fall? So again, I realize this is not the forum to get these questions answered. Hopefully, or maybe at some point it will be, but nevertheless, I would like answers to them, and I know many others would as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there
Hi
others?
there.
Go ahead.
Yes, good evening. My name is Hannah Jackson. I live at 32 Walker Lane, and I have one child going into 1st grade at Smith, a rising 6th grader at KP, and a rising 8th grader at KP. I am a participant in the EDI group in town, and it is my hope that through this participation, we can elicit positive changes in policy at the board level to better reflect and support equity, diversity, and inclusion in our school system in all facets. That being said, an area that I would like to touch on tonight, similar to what Nakia just said, is in regards to the school reopening planning that is taking place. While I recognize that this is a task that is overwhelming, as it is involving many scenarios and considerations, I think it's imperative that teachers, parents, and students are deeply involved in how this process moves forward. Specifically, I have questions about the advisories that were formed to aid in the plans for the reopening. Of the 5 committees, my questions are: what type of process was utilized to create these committees? Are there parents and students on all and any of these committees? Most importantly, what equity lens was being used to ensure that these committees are reflective and representative of the 40% of our school population that is non-white? I urge the Board of Ed to create and make readily available the process in which these committees were established so that parents can easily access the information that the committees are creating and be more a part of the process. As a parent, when I access the district reopening plan information online, and when I click on each advisory, I see a 1-sentence blurb on what it covers and the name of the chairperson of the committee. I'm looking for more transparency and more access to this process, possibly posting meeting minutes online, actively seeking parent representation from BIPOC parents and students in our communities, as well as, like others have said tonight, Superintendent Moore meeting with the EDI group to discuss further plans for making an equity policy and an equity audit the top priority this school year. I think this is imperative to supporting the growth and development of our school system. I realize that this is a very difficult time in many regards, but I also think that this is the perfect time in many ways to make big moves on the equity front and to lead by example in the way that we apply new systems of equity and diversity in the West Hartford Public Schools. As an educator and a mental health professional, I believe it's our duty to ensure that all of our children in our schools are safe, supported, and receiving an equitable education. I thank you all for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment this evening?
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Kalia Alston Griffin. I live at 110 St. James Street in West Hartford. I have a senior at Hall and an 8th grader at KP. I'm looking to start an EDI at Hall High School. I wanted to voice some concerns around the lack of communication and the reopening of schools. In a meeting I viewed on Facebook Live with Jillian Gilchrist and Christine Palm that was held regarding the plan to reopen, some West Hartford teachers expressed that they were not consulted in these plans and that they had some serious concerns. I shared in these concerns with the teachers, concerned over monitoring children, wearing masks all day, the ability to keep kids safe with poor ventilated classrooms, and wanting to know what happens when teachers get sick themselves. Another issue that was highlighted was mental health. Will additional mental health staff members be accessible to students due to the unprecedented situations that are being faced, the kids are being faced with? Current teams are not equipped to handle these new challenges. Will it be adding on to an already overwhelmed system? As a parent and social worker myself, I realize that children will be coming back to school in the middle of a pandemic and racial crisis in our country. Many dealing with death for the first time and facing new fears that will need to be addressed. We had a recent death of a child in our own town that affected many of our children and parents. We are trying to deal with this as a community. I know our children will need more support during this very difficult time. The mental health of children in our town should be of great concern. I would love to see some education around identified topics and an increase in access to support services for all youth. As a West Hartford resident, I also would have liked to see more parent involvement in your planning. Our concerns and opinions should have been compiled as well as asked for solutions. I did receive one survey right before school ended in the spring, but many of my friends and neighbors did not. That was curious to me. I wonder how impactful it was if many people were not reached by the survey. Collectively, we were not included in these plans. We need more transparency. At what point will all parents' voices be included in your plan? The communication needs to be improved between you and the community as a whole. I understand that you have committees, that you have some parents on there, that you might have spoken to the teacher representative. That's not enough. There are so many voices that you haven't heard, so many ideas and perspectives that are valuable and shouldn't be overlooked. Make an effort to reach out to as many people as possible. There's still time. Include parents when making decisions about their children. Include a diverse population of people when making these decisions. Remember that West Hartford services children from different ethnic and cultural backgrounds, different abilities and disabilities. Please look at these plans with an inclusive lens. I look forward to all parents being included in the school plans moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. We have reached our limit for comments regarding going back to school, reopening concerns. Are there people who wish to comment on a completely different topic? Otherwise, you're welcome to stay on and provide your public comment at the end of our meeting. Okay. Like I said, we will have public comment again at the end of the meeting. So we are going to move on to item number 4, unfinished business. Actually, before we do that, I just want to thank everyone who took the time and effort to comment tonight and to send emails to us regarding your concerns. Know that you're being heard, and I think you're going to learn a lot more over the course of the next little while this evening, and hopefully some of your concerns at least will be allayed. We don't have any items for unfinished business, so moving on to item 5, new business, A is proposed revised calendar for the 2020-2021 school year. And the recommendation is that the Board of Education review and adopt a proposed revised calendar for the 2020-2021 school year. So I'm going to turn this over to Superintendent Moore. As a reminder to board members, if you do have questions, you put a question mark in the chat box, and I will call on you in order of those question marks. All right. So, Tom, you're up.
Sure. Thanks, Deb. So last week, the State Board of Education passed a rule that shifted the 180-day school year to 177 days, but only if you use those 3 days at the beginning of the year for training, health training, and otherwise for the restart to school. So that I consider to be a very positive development for us, as I think it's natural that to get people back in school, we only had 2 days scheduled. Remember, I can't just make up new days. I deal with teacher contracts. And so as we go back, we need that time for training. We need that time for acclimating. And I think what you'll see here, I'm going to share. That's not sharing. All right, can you see the school calendar now?
No.
Nope. Okay.
I know you had it up before the meeting started, so.
Yeah, I was checking it then.
Yep,
okay.
there you go.
All right, now can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so what we see here is that the calendar in September would shift. We have a late Labor Day this year, so we were initially going to be starting on September 2nd. This would actually push the start of school to September 8th, the day after Labor Day. September 8th would be a Wednesday schedule, as would September 9th. This gives us the benefit of a full week of teacher in service that week. This gives them more time for setup, gives us more time for professional development, gives us more time to go through health protocols with our teachers. So I'm happy to answer questions about it, but I think it makes the most sense, and it doesn't affect the end of the calendar, as this has shifted the school year down.
Great, thank you. Are there questions from board members? I just have one question, not really a question, a comment so much, is that we still have 179 days of school as opposed to 177, correct?
That is correct.
Great. Mark.
Tom, I just want to say that I support this. Given the times, anything that you can do to help the teachers reacclimate to school is a worthy cause, and I think it just makes 100% sense. And I just want to applaud you for taking advantage of that and using the extra days to get those teachers reacclimated to school, if in fact that's where we're headed. So thank you for that.
Any other questions? Jason?
Yeah, thank you. When you were talking about using these days to prepare teachers, it made me think that there might be a possibility for using those days to also prepare families and to offer some other kinds of resources or suggestions for getting families ready and beginning conversations that will be continued when the school year starts.
Sure. Yeah, that's something certainly at a building level, principals could reach out to people and talk about how things are going to look. And that is something you'll see in the plan as we talk about it. That's going to be a rollout throughout August.
Okay.
I mean, the underlying point that you make, Jason, that I appreciate is it gives us another 3 days to get all that information. I mean, more time right now is a good thing to get that information out to families and to make sure that we can get that sharing out there. So certainly that's a thought process here.
Other questions? I will take a motion then to approve the revised calendar. Is there a motion?
So moved. Ari Steinberg.
Second, Mark
Thank you,
Sedano.
Ari. Is there a second?
Second, Mark Sedano.
Thank you, Mark. Any further comments or questions, discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Oh, shoot. Amanda. I'm sorry. We're going to let Amanda ask a question real quick.
Pardon me, I can wait till after the vote. I have a comment.
Okay. All those in favor of approval, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Abstentions? The ayes have it and the vote is unanimous. Go ahead, Amanda.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I think this is a good time since it's early in the meeting for us to acknowledge that when we look at the school calendar, typically there's reactions about excitement. When are we going to have vacations? How are we using our time? And there's also a lot of anxiety. When will I need childcare? So as we approach this particular school year, I really want to ask and encourage all of us as parents, because many of us on the board are parents as well as board members, to go into this calendar with a mindset of support for our teachers, so that as we are thinking about our travel, that we're making measured, safe, and restrained choices for Labor Day weekend, long weekends, weekends in general, how we spend our time, so that as the children are interacting with their teachers, when the week begins, the teachers are getting that reinforced idea that for this particular year, as we meet the realities of our time, that we have their backs, that they don't want mugs. They want to know that we are supporting their health and that we are doing that with our choices. There's a lot of people now who, if they are making choices to spend time in quiet, distant areas, they're talking about how they were masked, how they were coming back and getting tested. They're starting to build that culture around travel that will continue to help our teachers feel secure as they start to think about what their involvement will be with our physical classrooms. So that calendar this year, please, if you are listening to this as a parent, this is not the year to schedule a lot of far off travel. There's many opportunities for us to be each other's families this year and to help our community move through this process with restraint, so that our teachers are getting that support for their own mental health, their sense of safety, that we are doing that with them in mind. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to share that. I know that's something that we've all been talking about at the board level and throughout the community.
Thank you. All right. We're going to move on to staff communications and reports and to the superintendent's report. Tom, you're on mute.
Thanks, Deb. And I'm going to have Paul call up our presentation about the reopening of schools. And I have a couple comments to make at first about this. This document, there's a lot of comments about this before, a lot of letters, a lot of discussion, comment at the meeting, and the board doesn't respond to comments, but since so many have come in, it's incumbent upon me to say one thing. If anybody expects me to apologize for this, they're going to be sorely disappointed. In my career, there are very few things that I'm more proud that's been accomplished in 3 weeks than this document. And I want people to remember a couple things about this, because some people have come forward and said, let Tom Moore know your feelings about reopening. By all means, you can let your feelings be known to me about reopening. But the decision to open, and Paul, if you go to the next slide, the decision to open was not made in a vacuum in West Hartford. On June 26th, the governor made an announcement that he would be welcoming kids, June 25th, that schools would reopen in the fall and would be welcoming our children back to school, all children back to school. On June 29th, a state plan of 50 pages was issued. that required us to come back with a design of 3 distinct things. 1, a plan to provide for in-school instruction for all students on a full-time basis, unless a family voluntarily opts into remote learning. 2, a plan to provide both in-person and remote learning support options, a hybrid plan, accessing instruction and curriculum online, resulting in limited student population on school premises at any given time. And, sorry, my lights go out. And 3rd, a plan for total remote learning to provide a strategy for the potential of future cancellation of school or a certain class requiring all students to access instruction and curriculum online for a period of time. So the discussions that we want to have, and as this became national, all right, and we look at national statistics, and we look at people making bold declarations nationally about what should happen, we have to understand different places are in different situations. But one thing that is clear is that Connecticut's plan still, and this is the governor and state department of education, and this guidance came out today. At this time, Connecticut state law requires that access to public school classes be offered to students for 177 days, if we make that, and 900 hours, unless, because of the waiver, and then excluding public school students for certain days of the week, for example, having certain grades only attend school on Monday and Tuesday with remote learning the other day, that is, instituting a hybrid plan for this year, is not appropriate under the model. This is part of Governor Lamont's executive orders, and this decision is about, his decision is that at this point, we're planning for a return to school and planning for a hybrid plan and planning for a remote plan to those students that opt out. In addition, there's a 3rd plan, a hybrid plan, that we'll talk about as we roll it out today. But it's impossible to talk about this decision to reopen without understanding the emotions involved. I get it. I get the teachers and their fears. I get parents and their fears. I get people that absolutely believe, because I got a call today, if you don't reopen, I'm going out of business. And my family, we will leave West Hartford. We won't be able to survive. And I just want us as a community to please come together and have patience for each other and understand what people are going through. Because even little things, in college, I paid my way through college. People know the story. I'm the youngest of 7 in my family, and the only one that went to college. I paid my way through college by working in a bar. I bartended, I bounced. If I was in college and this had happened, I wouldn't be sitting here today. And I say, and everybody says, bars have to close. I get it. But our society has not developed all the structures in place to take care of those people whose businesses and livelihoods close. So I'm asking people to please be patient, and that there isn't one right answer here. Because we have to have sympathy for people who are worried about their livelihood. We have to have sympathy for people that are worried about their health. But we have to make sure that this isn't an us versus them. Because the decision about going back to school being politicized, as if this is liberal or conservative, this isn't. This is personal. This is mom and dad and kids and teachers and families. And what we've put together is something that blends all those concerns, and I would argue more than any other district in the state blends equity concerns. And I think a lot of these questions about Rosina, about myself, and about the position of Director of Equity Advancement, you know, I'll admit, it's hard not to be defensive in that exists here. Other people come to West Hartford to try to emulate that. I don't want anybody to minimize Rosina's role. Rosina, from the time I've worked with Rosina 13 years ago, if there is one person that dictates the way this district is moving, it's Rosina. She is my greatest educational partner I've ever had. And if you can convince Rosina to tell me something, you're going to get what you want, because I listen to her more than anybody else. So to lessen a meeting with Rosina in any way is that you don't understand Rosina's role, and you don't understand what's happening in this district. And lastly, after 4 months of this, I can tell you one thing, and this may sound, this is defensive, and I make it a point to never be defensive, but I'm going to be tonight. Because every communication that I send out, this is different than anywhere else. When you reply, that reply comes to me directly. And I reply to the people that ask questions. I reply to the people with their feedback. I do it at night. I do it on Saturdays. I do it on weekends. You have an open, direct line to me. And believe me, people use it. And if over the past 4 months, and especially the past month, there's one group of people that I need to apologize to, they're named Tara, Jack, and Fallon. They're my family. Because I've spent every waking hour on this plan that we're about to roll out. And I can't thank Rosina for her help enough. I can't thank Paul, Rick, Gretchen, Andy. And I need people to remember something about, I know everybody wants a survey. I know everybody wants feedback. I know everybody wants everybody involved in something. I was part of a mission statement creation 10 years ago, and that mission statement took 9 months to create. We had 3 weeks to create a plan to re-enter kids into school. We had 3 weeks. It unveils on Thursday. And then we have 3 weeks, because we need to find, I get the point of, how are you asking me to tell you what I'm going to come back to? I get that completely without knowing what's out there. Except for we can't plan, we can't hire without knowing where people are. The results of the survey have basically come in now at about 75% plan to return to school, which is about 5,400 people, 8.5% saying participate at home, and about 16.5% uncertain. We need to know basically within the next week and a half, and parents will be reaching out to people, what their feelings are once they've had the opportunity to go through this plan. This plan will go out to people on Thursday. Everybody will have a chance to read it. It's at the print shop now. We have to go through things. We have to go through edits. As this goes out, people will have the opportunity to respond. And they will be reached out from their principals, because we have to populate those schools and those classes. So a lot of questions will come up tonight during the presentation, and I get that. And there's frequently asked questions at the end of the presentation. And I think it's important for people to take time as they go through the document on Thursday, because it's hard to ingest it all at once. All right. So we talked about the design requirements. That it's actually not one plan, it's 3 distinct plans. Guiding principles, we used 4 guiding principles that I discussed earlier. Students, staff, and community safety. Health experts are parts of our committee. Community experts, Department of Public Health. That's our priority. And part of that safety structure isn't any one thing. This is based on layers, that there are layers of what we have to do, so that if any one of those things doesn't happen, there are other layers. And Andy's going to talk more about that in his portion of the presentation. Equitable educational opportunities for all students through on-site instruction. And this goes to the point of people that are very quick to say it's not safe. We need just to do virtual instruction. And I get it. And the numbers may go to a point where that's the answer. Virtual instruction isn't safe for everybody either. We lost a percentage of our kids. If we are concerned about equity as a driving force in our district, as I am, that's what I worry most about if we're all virtual. Because the equity issues there are exacerbated. And the kids that are going to struggle the most are the ones we can afford the least to have struggled that much. We understand if you surround yourself with people that are able to telecommute and work from home. We can complain about, I have to teach my kid too, and it's a pain in the neck, and I'm not as good as a teacher, but you're there. There are other kids that their safety net is school, that where they go to feel safe is school. So this weighs greatly on me about our decisions. Third is high quality alternatives for remote online learning coupled with family choice regarding on-site school instruction or remote learning. There's a lot of places that their plan for online learning is turn a webcam on. That's not online learning. There will not be a district in this state whose online plan is more robust than West Hartford's. But to get this across to people, what this means is that in 6 weeks, we have to build 2 brand new schools, one a K-5 school and one a 6 to 12 school. We have to put teachers in place. We have to build the classes. We have to develop our course offerings. We have to develop a schedule to make sure that that online learning experience that a parent is opting into for very good reasons, and I get it, we need to make sure that that's up to the standards of West Hartford Public Schools education. And then integration of a full range of services, inclusive of social emotional programming to support student needs during reintegration and beyond. This is one of our committees. People talk about reintegration, social emotional needs. This isn't a common committee, frankly, around the state. And it's something we're committed to understanding both the cost if kids are out and the adjustments that are going to be needed when kids come back. That's incredibly important and a guiding thought there. Now, the committees themselves, I want to thank the committees because they're working, they're ongoing, and all the committees will be posted with all the names of all the members. They're actually already are posted, but they'll be included in the plan at the end of the plan. Health and safety is headed by Dr. Morrow. Curriculum instruction and assessment is headed by Paul Vicinas. Social emotional impacts headed by Dr. Gretchen Nelson. Employee workplace safety is headed by Rick Ledwith, and community outreach is headed by Rosina Haskins. When we talk about teacher input, these committees, we asked our WHA leadership to appoint teachers to these committees. I said to teachers the other day in an email, I know people would like to be surveyed, but that decision about opening or not, that's going to be the governor's decision at this point, not mine. The survey I asked parents about was so that we could populate our classes. It wasn't, it was to gain specific information that we needed as we move forward. Basic precautions. And this is, we're going to start with masks. This is a non-negotiable in West Hartford, okay? And I can tell you, we have spent money on masks, and we have more masks than you would know what to do with. We have Hall masks, if you're loyal to Hall on the north end of town. We have red masks if you're on the south end of town. We ordered 8,000, and we're the only ones to get them, so I've actually sublet them out to other districts because Dr. Morrow thought I hadn't got them. Clear masks, where you can see my lips, because we have American Sign Language and we have hearing impaired and deaf students that's going to work the best for. We have 8,000 of those. We even have, and you won't find me as adorable probably as the children that will wear these, but we have children's size masks for pre-K, kindergarten, and we've got a lot of these coming in addition to disposable masks for people. So we want to make sure kids are safe. And masks, every day a new study comes out that shows the importance of masks. And I will say it directly to people. If you don't want your child to wear a mask, or you believe your child cannot wear a mask out of convenience, and I don't mean convenience, they're not going to like it, then you need to choose online learning. Now, there are a few exceptions, and that is basically, there are special education exceptions in students with needs. And even in those cases, we're working through. So I'm asking parents from here through the start of school, if your kids are coming back, get them used to wearing masks. It takes a while, there's no doubt about it. But I've seen kids at all different ages now that are getting used to it, that people that told me my kid will never be able to wear it, that are wearing it. And during the school day, we'll have mask breaks and we'll talk about that. But that's a key component. Distancing, we'll talk about as much as possible. One of the key elements of masks is anybody that tells you everybody will always be 6 feet away, they're lying to you. That will not happen in a school. And there could be some setups. The reason I don't have any numbers in this is because different buildings have different sized rooms. And so what's appropriate in one building may not be appropriate in another building. And we're going to do the best we can without necessarily being able to change our physical space. Going outside as much as possible. Sorry. People should at least be pleased that I'm energy conscious. Going outside as much as possible is going to be something that is a key part for our teachers. Could be for eating outside, could be for class outside, could just be for a break outside. And that's going to be something that we talk about. HVAC, Andy's going to talk about. We've hired outside people to come in and talk about HVAC. All of these things, unfortunately, have one big element. They cost a lot of money. This spring, I fear, well, before this spring, one of my roles as superintendent that I have to do is operate within a budget. I'm not operating within that budget that you passed, that the Board of Education and then the town council passed. We've had to hire a consultant to address facilities requirements, including HVAC. We've had to order 1,500 desks to replace tables because K through 2 had historically been tables over the years. Now a lot of them are being replaced by desks. We had to remove extraneous items and rent storage space. Jandy will talk about, we have to rent storage space for the year because our classrooms, all of those things have to be moved out. And we don't have the space to put those in. And when this is all over, those things can come back. Basically all those soft surfaces. Plexiglass shields for teachers' desks. We have over 900 teachers. That's a lot of plexiglass shields. Plexiglass shields, some for students' desks when there's issues with the student. Some of those in some places. Tables for outdoor instruction spread around the district. And some tables for picnicking outside spread across the district. Signage, systems controls, purchasing of different vents, filters. During the year, something like running our HVAC systems longer. If we run our HVAC systems longer, 20%, Andy will talk about that. That's $300,000 during the year. Okay. Cleaning supplies, soap, hand sanitizer, all of those, masks, bus monitors the first couple weeks of schools, student devices, all those devices that we have to make sure kids have. Then teachers. We're still getting information from our teachers about how many can't come back. And so Rick will talk about this, but we have a disability problem and we have a hiring their replacement problem. Where for that number, all those costs come back. Now, even if those teachers are teaching in virtual world, the problem is it's not like it's a class from one school going to virtual world and that teacher just travels with them. It's culled off the top of all the places. And remember, we can't just make our class sizes 25 in those places and combine them. People talk about mental health, certainly those needs. Cafeteria costs, substitutes. It's easy to say, everybody stay home if you don't feel good, but somebody's got to be in there to teach the kids. And so all of those costs that come through. Teaching assistants to help cover that. And then more custodians because of increased demand during the day. All these things go forward. We're not talking a couple $100,000, talking a few $1 million during the year. And this is really a test for West Hartford because people have a lot of demands in West Hartford, and I get it. And I answer those demands all the time. And we've proposed ventilation year after year, and people always say air conditioning. You've heard it. People are like, isn't that air conditioning? We're like, no, it's ventilation. Well, it's been 8 years running that I've been proposing that in CIP. And those are the kind of things that we have to make a decision on a town level. And we have to make it at the worst time because our economy is also suffering. But one thing that I think about sometimes with financial implications of things is we brag about being 110th in per pupil expenditure out of 169 cities of towns. And I'm very proud of the efficiency we operate with and the product that we put forward. But what I notice, I get these recruitment letters from other districts, from other states, and the first thing they say is, we're first in our state in per pupil expenditures. And that's something that's interesting to be bragging about too, because West Hartford asked for a lot. And in the spring, we're going to be asking for a significant budget number, not just for this year, but for next year. And if opening schools is as important as we all believe it is, and doing it safely, and if we're not going to get money from the federal government, which we should, and if we're not going to get more money from the state government, which is also asking for federal assistance, then it's on us. And that's just the reality of the situation. And I don't want to move away from the plan itself because I'm excited for you to see the plan because it is so well designed and well thought out. And the people that wrote the various points, but it would be impossible not to talk about the cost of this. And so with that, I'm going to ask Andy to take over the next part and begin talking about the health and safety measures.
Can I just jump in real quick?
Yeah.
I think that we've decided it's best to keep all of our board questions until the end of the presentation because I feel like some of them might get addressed.
Yeah, I think I greatly appreciate that because I think a lot of it is reiterative from the different parts and kind of circles back. So certainly. All right.
Great. Thanks, Tom, and good evening, everyone. Before I go ahead and review the operations and the plan, I'd like to just give a thank you to a couple of people, to Bob Palmer, to Paul Edlund, Mike Longo, Bill Phibbs, all of our plant and services team across the district. They have been really working nonstop since May and will continue throughout the summer to get us ready on top of the usual summer work and the construction that we do, which is still ongoing. And so the work that they do is amazing and it's greatly appreciated. Also, Eric Dempsey and our security staff have been involved in our daily distribution efforts and are deeply involved and will continue to be involved in assessing the safety of our plans. Eric is incredibly knowledgeable, can't imagine doing this without his expertise. The medical experts, the emergency management professionals, the teachers, and the parents who are giving their time as part of our health and safety advisory. Their work and their contributions are proving invaluable as we plan for September. And so, to caveat a little bit, while a lot of hard work has been done and gone into these plans already, there's still a lot of work that we're continuing to do and that will still need to be done. We're going to continue to work closely with the West Hartford Bloomfield Health District, with the state, and these plans that we're presenting this week will be updated based on new guidance as we receive it from the CDC and or changes to the federal and to the state orders. As Tom had mentioned, there really isn't one magic solution to this. Instead, there's multiple factors that working together minimize the risk of infection and can help us keep our community safe. So I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing from a facility standpoint. So Bob Palmer and I are working with each of our building principals to develop a plan for their school, which addresses the cleaning, the ventilation, the classroom layout, and the daily operations. And as part of this, we have a custodial task force that is looking at the custodial changes recommended by the State Department in Connecticut and some of the things that they're looking at and doing is reducing the clutter in the classrooms to create space for social distancing, revising our cleaning and our staffing plans to increase cleaning frequency of high-touch surfaces during the school day, to conduct thorough cleanings and disinfectings each night. We will have designated people, as you will see in the schools, whose only job will be to go through the schools on a daily basis, hitting those high-touch areas, and to make sure that bathrooms and those other areas are sanitized during the day. As you see from some of the photos there, one of the goals that we've been doing is establishing room for classes to be able to social distance. And so what that means is a lot of materials comes out of our classrooms. Anything really that we can't easily disinfect, any soft surfaces. And it's tough because we have spent the last 20 years in education creating very nurturing classrooms with reading nooks, with beanbag chairs, with with small rugs and stuff like that. And really all of that has to go this year. And we have to pull all that out. As you can see from the picture above, we are busy pulling out materials like that, things that we can't easily clean, excess furniture and such. And we have rented a very nice warehouse in town that we will spend the summer moving those materials to, so that we can then bring them back when it is safe to do so. Our staff will also be added to address frequent disinfecting of surfaces like door handles, I mentioned, handrails, playground equipment, other shared surfaces and materials. And where possible, based on the recommendations, we're also putting in place non-touch uses of items for doors, for trash cans. We, in many places, have bottled stations instead of drinking fountains, so we don't have to be touching common drinking fountains. In bathrooms, you will see paper towels being used instead of blowers, again, following the recommendations. There's also recommendations in the state plan for ventilation. And as part of this, we've convened a district HVAC task force that's going to look at the Department of Public Health guidance on actions that we should be taking to ensure that our ventilation systems are performing to their ultimate capacity to help ensure the health of all the occupants. And so part of this is the task force will review and develop each building within the framework that's being provided to us, and develop an operational plan to increase fresh air ventilation and circulation. As part of this, one of the recommendations is to side engineering firms. And so we have contracted an outside HVAC mechanical engineering firm that has the expertise, the familiarity with some of our ventilation systems, to really make sure that our plans make sense, to review the plans from an engineering standpoint. In addition to that, we'll be contracting out with a group that will be dealing with our air balancing to find the optimum fresh air rates and circulation in all of our different buildings, and another group that is going to be addressing our HVAC control units to make sure that they're operating in the most efficient way. We've also convened a similar task force to comply with the Department of Public Health return to service and examination of water systems, and the West Hartford Town Engineering Division will assist us in this work as needed. As I said, we converted the majority of our hallway drinking fountains to bottle refilling stations. We'll continue to go ahead and do that. One of the biggest issues that we've addressed and will continue to address, as Bob and I work with each of the principals last week, this week, etc., is the classroom layout. And so looking at the best practices and the guidances that we have, we're working with each building principal to address social distancing in classrooms, in hallways, in bathrooms, and also importantly at both entry and dismissal times. We talk about making sure that we don't have 300 students all gathering in one area at the entry. And the dismissal, it's very different, and it will look very different at a lot of our elementary schools. Social distancing, as you can see in the picture, will be between student desks will be maximized, achieving, again, per the guidance, 6 feet where feasible. Desks will be facing in the same direction rather than having students facing each other across the room. And as I mentioned before, also to best utilize the space, we're clearing it of materials that can't be cleared every day, and a lot of the excess stuff that accumulates in a classroom over the years, because again, the idea is we want to be able to create as much space as possible to assist with circulation and ventilation. Classroom layouts, in addition to maximizing the space between teachers and students, we're also going to have physical barriers such as plexiglass shielding that will be available for teachers for their desks, and also will be available, these are portable shields that will be available for instructional situations where physical distancing is not possible. We've also added, as Tom had mentioned before, a dozen new outdoor tables at each of our schools, and teachers and principals are developing plans. They will be encouraged to use the outdoor instruction where conditions and space allow. Each classroom cohort will also have access to designated restrooms and washing stations, as well as hand sanitizers as needed. We'll talk a little bit about cohorting. Some of the daily operation piece that is a key recommendation from the state, and really a recommendation from a lot of different groups, is the idea that limiting the number of students and staff if there is a transmission, in the idea of cohorting a group of students. At the elementary, this is pretty easy to understand because students are in a classroom, and I may be in a cohort of 15 fourth graders in my class with my teacher. Instead of, however, having these fourth graders walking throughout the building to various classrooms and perhaps transmitting unknowingly, we are going to have to follow the recommendations to have cohorts stay in the same room as much as possible. And so what this means at the elementary school is that these students, the special teachers, the art, the music, the language, they're going to come to their classroom wherever possible instead of going to those rooms. And we're also going to assign students to seats. We're going to limit shared materials, technology and supplies. We've worked very closely with principals, worked very closely with our IT group, and so that we are able to make sure that in a fourth grade classroom, there are the designated Chromebooks if needed, so each student has one assigned to them, and there's not this passing back and the sharing of the technology, as well as art and all those other materials as well. We're going to make sure that classrooms have bathrooms assigned to it. Meals will be served either in classrooms, outside, or in parts of the building, cafeteria and otherwise, that we can use to make sure that we keep cohorts together and that they're safe while they eat. Principals at the elementary level are developing recess plans with cohorts in mind to minimize exposure and contact and playground equipment, and also multiple recess times to break up the instructional day, recognizing if students are not going to be walking from room to room to room, there will be other needs and opportunities for them to get outside and to get up and to move. At each middle school, our team structures allow us to serve as cohorts and allow us to limit student contact and movement throughout the buildings. We'll schedule students within their teams as much as possible. And likewise, at the high schools, although we don't have strict cohort, we will be able to schedule students with the goal of limiting exposure and movements. And Paul will talk about how the idea of the block schedule at the middle school and high school really cuts down on that traffic and allows us to make much smaller cohorts and allows us to really control some of that transmission. Each building will be evaluated. We will pull in the town engineers if needed to help us with traffic patterns, to limit congestion where appropriate. Hallways and staircases will be designated one way. Floor markings will indicate traffic flow. And at the secondary level, we'll work with principals to make sure and maximize really the passing time. And if we can, stagger that for various parts of the building as needed to best accommodate student patterns. So one of the things that Tom had talked about as well, as far as transportation, if you can move us over, Paul.
Good on that?
Yeah, I think you're out of order, but that's okay. There we go. So for transportation, this is really a year that's going to require a lot of flexibility and a lot of understanding. We're going to, now that we've identified and will continue to identify over the next couple of weeks, parents who will be returning, whose students will be returning to school, we're going to be contacting those parents and surveying them on their intent to use busing. As you know, we transport approximately 6,000 students in West Hartford each year. And it's important that we really, I don't know how to, I'll put it besides saying, make sure that we're trying to keep those bus seats available for kids who absolutely need them. And so I've talking with a lot of parents, being a parent myself and talking with a lot of parents, I think a lot of parents have decided that, yes, we want our kids to go back to school, but we're going to drop them off at school. We're going to transport them back and forth and won't be needing the buses. And that's fantastic. And so we will be asking parents, if they can, to transport students, because we really are going to try to keep that space available on buses for kids who have no other way to get to school. We're going to employ monitors at the start of school on all of our buses to help acclimate, to help enforce bus expectations and requirements. We've gone ahead and already canceled the open seat program that we usually open up in October, which allows, if there are vacant seats, for you to join onto a bus and take advantage of our transportation. It's just not practical at this point when we're trying to do our best to space students out and to maximize the space and the routes that we have. Where it's appropriate, principals will be assigning seats, and all students will be wearing face masks during transit, both prior to boarding at the bus stop, and these must be kept in place. No ifs, ands, or buts. We're going to continue to work closely with our bus providers to make sure that everything is safe. We will make sure that our bus drivers will follow all of our health screening that we're going to be doing for our own employees. We'll make sure that that's reinforced there. One of the things that it's important to understand is that the transportation status of what we can operate under isn't determined by us. It's determined by the Department of Public Health in the state of Connecticut. And so I've put up there's three status that they're operating under: the safe, the low, and the moderate. We're currently under the low status, which means that we can operate our buses up to full capacity with mask requirements and loading and unloading restrictions. What this means is we go ahead and we load as students come on the bus. They load from the back of the bus forward, and we dismiss from the front of the bus back. Again, the idea of trying to minimize the number of students that are walking past one another and in close proximity. If we go to moderate status, it's usually we'll have to operate at significantly reduced capacity, and the passenger density is at least halved in this situation, because we would be operating under at least the hybrid schedule with modified physical attendance. But in that case, we actually have to space students out at least 6 feet apart using alternating diagonal seating. And so there's a big challenge for that, and there's a big challenge in making sure that we're able to safely transport students if we get to that point. And so again, we'll be going out, we'll be asking parents to please, if they can forego transportation and busing this year, it would be greatly appreciated. We'll also be spending time at each school and with each principal to talk about the parent drop-off, understanding then if we're asking more parents to drive, there will be more traffic coming into schools, and we're going to have to make arrangements for that, not only for the dropping off, but then for safe entry into the buildings so that people are not massing in one area. And so we'll address that as well with West Hartford Police and with all of the related groups for that. So talking a little bit about health practice and protocols, and I should caveat and say, like any new situation and learning, it's going to be important to take time to teach our students and our staff and our parents on the practices that we're going to require to prevent the spread of diseases, and that includes the social distancing, frequent hand washing, the masks to cover the nose and the mouth, our cough etiquette, and again, the enhanced cleaning and the disinfecting of surfaces. And so I know Rosina will talk a little bit later that the Community Outreach Advisory is working with principals to create age-appropriate lessons to review these policies and these practices, and we're going to have those in place across the board, across the school system and across the community. We're also going to dedicate extensive time beginning of the year, as well as frequent reminders as the year goes on to review these policies and procedures, making sure that we're educating our community on the health practices so that they can make appropriate decisions and comply with our policies and our practices. It will have adequate supplies for all of the systems and the guidance in place. As Tom mentioned, we have adequate PPE. We have a pipeline to ensure the continued sourcing of PPE, of sanitizers, of soap, of towels, of disinfectant, of masks, and we will continue to monitor the use on a weekly basis to track this usage and to make sure that we have the adequate supplies maintained. In talking about illnesses and reporting illnesses and monitoring illnesses, it's important that families and staff be informed about when to stay home if they're not feeling well and may have had exposure to COVID-19. We're going to be communicating this information frequently through mailings, through emails, through websites, through building notifications, through newsletters. And our health and safety advisory, along with our nursing staff, nursing supervisors, working closely with the West Hartford Bloomfield Health District to develop these guides and protocols for parents that address a couple of the following: the idea of the self-assessment health screening requirements and the checklist for both staff and for students to complete on a daily basis prior to leaving for school, to identify symptoms and to identify that they are healthy and are able to attend. Procedures for parents and for staff to confidentially inform the school and the district if they are sick or have had no one contact with someone. We're considering and developing district-wide protocols and materials consistent with both the Department of Public Health and with CDC guidelines that include the signs and symptoms and that address procedures for symptomatic students and staff, and the protocols for monitoring this information and possible illness, again, with the idea of complying not only with the privacy and the health regulations that we have, but also the goal of decreasing the spread and contracting the virus. So as far as the containment plan that we're required to put together, we're in a little bit of a holding pattern with some of the specifics because we've been told that the Connecticut Department of Public Health will be providing a tiered system to assist leaders and define the decision-making approach, should there be a partial or a full cancellation. But what we are doing is working with guidance from the CDC, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Connecticut Department of Public Health, the West Hartford Board, and Bloomfield Health Department, and our Health and Advisory and Safety Advisory. We're considering and finalizing a medical policy that's consistent for the school dismissal of a student or a staff member who exhibits symptoms. And this will outline clear medical pathways and decision-making protocols, and will communicate when it's safe and approved for a student or staff member to return to school. As part of this, as part of the requirements, each building we've had to identify an isolation room if a child or a teacher exhibits symptoms of COVID-19 and is deemed to possibly be infected. We've identified a room in each building to accommodate these students until a parent or a guardian can arrive and pick them up. Again, there's very specific requirements for this room. The use of the room is logged. The person's supervising is equipped with the proper PPE per the guidance and so forth. It's cleaned after each use. We've also added a separate air filtration system into each of these rooms. So we will be able to, if there is a contamination, go ahead and clean and change out these filters as well. if there's a confirmed case of COVID-19 per the current guidance, and again, this may change as the Department of Public Health and other groups are working to finalize their guidance. If currently, if a student, a staff member, or a visitor has a confirmed diagnosis of COVID-19, the superintendent of schools notifies the West Hartford Bloomfield Health Department director, and we assist with their assessment of the exposure and the contact tracing. And based on their current recommendations and their guidance, the superintendent will make the decision on the closure of a school building for 2 to 5 days to allow for cleaning and disinfecting per the CDC guidelines on cleaning and disinfecting, and the evaluation of the spread via the efforts of the health department's contact tracing. In some cases, based on smaller cohorts, this might be limited or contained to a smaller cohort. In some cases, this might be involving a larger number of students or even more than one school. So again, there's lots of information and more details in the report that's going to the state later this week. I guess to reiterate, what's important to remember is that none of these things work on their own, but it's the combination of the hand washing, of our intense focus on sanitation and building cleaning, on mask wearing, on physical distancing. All of these together will allow us to mitigate the risks and to safely return to our schools. Tom,
if I could, before Paul, one thing I want to add, and because it's really important about these health and safety metrics, and this is one of the biggest questions that we have. What happens if somebody gets sick? What happens if somebody gets a fever? Geez, this late. One thing people have to know, people will get a fever. People will get sick. On a given day at our small schools, there are 20 to 30 nurse visits a day. Okay. And so we know that early on, that's going to lead to concern from people, but it just is what happens. And there are going to be cases where we say, well, you need to stay out until there's a test or something else, depending on what those symptoms manifest themselves as. But one of the other things that we need to stress with parents are going to want to know, who is that kid? We will not and cannot, by law, share the name of any child, any staff member, or anybody else that tests positive for any disease, just as has been our practice in the past. We can't do that without somebody's permission. And so this is really important to understand, that we'll notify people as we always do. We'll share the information with people, but we won't be specific about things because we can't by law. That's the way we have to operate in school. Paulie?
Great. Good evening, everyone. Paul Vicinis, and I'm going to talk about school operations and academics. I'll go through the piece on what it looks like at the elementary school, secondary, and then Dr. Nelson is going to talk, and I'll chime in a little bit on special populations. We'll also be joined by Dr. Haskins, and together they'll talk about social emotional learning, which is a component of our in-school instructional planning. We'll talk about community outreach, and we'll wrap this up with professional development before we turn it over to Rick. But before I begin my piece, I just wanted to also give a thanks to our West Hartford Education Association, Teresa McEwen, specifically our union president, and all of the teachers, the many, many teachers that have worked not only on my committee, but on all the committees that have really given voice to teacher perspectives. And I'll also go back and I'd like to say, you know, we had some great students speaking earlier tonight. And I just want everyone listening to know that the meetings that we sat in on at the school level and the surveys that we did have definitely given voice to our online plans in terms of what worked for students. So I do appreciate that input, and I just want to make sure that folks are well informed on the process. In terms of the return to school, you just heard very, very specifically the comprehensive measures that Andy Morrow and our entire school health and safety committee have looked at with the efforts and support of health officials. So I'm not going to necessarily repeat that information, but I'll just talk about the additive pieces that we have. We do anticipate more than ever smaller class sizes. We know that that physical distancing is important. We're also aware that there is a significant percentage of our population who are making the choice not to return to school, whether that be for for medical reasons, personal reasons, or otherwise. We respect that choice, and that is, the state mandates that, but it's important to us as a community, even if the state didn't, that we're able to enable that choice. So as we subtract out those folks that won't be returning, and as we do our outreach to those who have yet to decide, it's clear to us that we will be able to achieve smaller class sizes. And that we will arrange those in, as Andy mentioned, in classroom assignments at the elementary level, which will represent a stable cohort. It's not to say, we recognize kids go home. It's not to say that school is the only cohort and that everyone's moving in together. There are going to be others, but our job in the school and our planning is to find the measures by which we can reduce those numbers of transitions. And so one way that happens naturally at the elementary is in the classroom assignment. The second way is to bring the specials, the arts instruction, music, library media, world language, into the classroom, into the grade level teacher's classroom to the greatest extent possible. We'll do that. We'll at the same time reduce shared materials by having devices, whether they're computer devices, whether they're art supplies, assigned directly to a student where feasible, so they're not doing a lot of sharing, and it also cut down on the necessary cleaning and sanitation of shared equipment. That doesn't necessarily mean if I'm going to school that every computer will necessarily go home. It just means that, I may have computer 7 and I'm the only student in Mrs. Jones' room to use computer 7. For library media, we may do library on a cart. We can look at things like a menu system where I come in and I've described some books and you kind of choose what you'd like, and then I'm able to bring that book to you, as opposed to students in large numbers going to a common space and kind of pawing and touching all the materials there, again, reducing our need for the cleaning protocols. We will do, the one thing I'll say, I won't repeat what Andy said, but I will mention that we will do instruction with our students on what are proper hand washing procedures. What's the length of time? How do you need to do it? What's the appropriate wearing of a mask? How do we make sure that we're wearing it correctly? And we'll do, make sure that students understand what 6 feet of distance or what appropriate physical distancing looks like in those settings. Last thing I do want to mention, because it has come up from teachers, in terms of finding dedicated time for our classroom teachers for their planning, we will have workspaces that are dedicated outside the classroom, so that when the specials area teachers are coming in, our grade level teachers will have a place to go where their materials are, and they'll be able to plan and make all of those, take all of those appropriate actions that they would normally do in their classroom. At the middle and high school, very similar. Again, we will have smaller class sizes. And in terms of cohortings, obviously the middle school teams by themselves represent a stable cohort. They break a grade level down by at least a third. And we're planning to institute a block schedule at both middle school and the high school in order to reduce the number of transitions that students have. That's going to serve a number of different purposes. It's going to reduce hallway traffic and the potential for any exposure in that regard. It's also going to reduce, in terms of number of classroom interactions that a single student has, should there be anyone who is positive, any potential transmission. It's going to reduce the number of transitions that students have to eliminate, or at least reduce risk, in that regard. Our block schedule, I'll show you a picture of that in a moment in terms of what it looks like, but essentially we go from an 8-period day to 4 periods a day with an increased time, and I'll talk a little bit more about it on the next slide. Again, we'll utilize the same procedures to reduce materials through the assignment of devices as necessary, but at the middle and high school levels, we'll also look at a bring your own device opportunity where students, if they have one from home, can bring that in and utilize that right within the classroom so that they have their own equipment, that they're maintaining themselves, that they're cleaning themselves, and that's definitely not being utilized by other folks. Picture of the schedule of what a schedule could look like. This isn't the exact schedule down by the minute, but it's pretty darn close in terms of what a schedule may look like at a high school. The middle school schedule looks very, very parallel. We would be dividing the day into an A-B rotation. So every other day, you'll have either your odd periods or even periods, essentially 4 periods of the day. There will be a 30-minute lunch dedicated each day. At the high school, we would plan for a weekly community or advisory type period where we have already planned for not only our social emotional learning, but how we're going to attend to our anti-racism education. At the middle school, we would intend for that advisory type period to be daily. We're increasing passing time, as I think Dr. Morrow mentioned, so that we could potentially stagger dismissal of classes by grade level or by area of the building to ensure that, again, the fewest number of students are in contained spaces like the hallway at one time. We are going to preserve at the high school the lab period connected to our science classes. So there will be additional time built into the school week for labs. That's going to happen on a 4-day rotation. So as you look across the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of this week, you see that there's period 4 lab on Tuesday or Thursday. So the students would have lab on one of those 4 days in that period. And on the opposing day, they would either have their PE class or they would potentially have a study hall. We would definitely be looking at our schedule to try to maximize the number of times if a student was assigned a study hall, that happened either at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day, so that we could also maximize early dismissal or late arrival for any student. And we would remove restrictions where that would not only be available to upperclassmen, but we can make that available to all students. Again, our middle school schedule will look very, very similar with the exception of an advisory period daily. In addition to this, we are offering, as we mentioned, remote instruction for any and all students at a parent request. At the elementary level, at all of our levels, it would look similar in terms of the fact that it's going to be delivered online using whether that's Google Classroom or whether that's Seesaw or Classroom Dojo. And we have some other features that are similar in terms of some of our programs, such as Elementary Dreambox or Lexia for ongoing daily practice. But the big difference will be we're planning for it to be much more synchronous, meaning that there would be direct instruction by teachers through video conference on Google Meets. You would expect at the elementary level between 90 and 120 minutes per day. That's going to vary based on the age of students and obviously the developmental appropriateness for screen time and their ability to attend and focus on a computer for shorter or longer periods. We would also post in those learning platforms asynchronous learning. We'd post, an independent reading assignment. We'd post writing assignments, potentially some things to do for exploration. And we would stagger, and you'll see this in the next slide, an arts rotation through the schedule daily. So what a sample group could look like at the elementary level, and group sizes at the elementary when they're online would be smaller. They'd be between 4 and 6 students based on the size of the cohort and based on the age of the kids, making them smaller at the younger grades. Students that 90 to 120 minutes would be broken out potentially, as you see here, a morning meeting time, some longer blocks of instruction on math and literacy, and again, an arts rotation that would vary by day, cycling our world language, our music, our art, our PE, and our library media throughout. At the secondary level, basically kind of the same idea, only the blocks of instruction would be slightly longer. Again, we would be utilizing a block schedule, so students would only have to attend to 4 periods per day. In terms of the feedback that students gave us for our remote instruction, we would plan for a slightly later start at 8:30. You'll see that in a moment. Again, we would hang a lot of the items in that Google Classroom, but we'd provide through video conferencing, direct instruction daily in those classes. We'd have the ability to do individual or small group breakouts during our live instruction. And we'd also provide time for potentially, we'd talk to teachers if we're doing, say, for instance, in the sample schedule, an hour, we'd look for, hey, in the last 15 minutes of that class, if we need to provide some right then one-on-one support or small group support, we could do that, or some independent practice. But we'd be asking our teachers to plan for a minimum of 45 and as much as 60 minutes of direct instruction. Again, we'd look for whether that's a daily or a weekly advisory based on middle or high school. We'd again be providing the same structure of a lab period, so an additional period for science on that same 4-day rotation. And as you can see at the bottom, we would build in some kind of office hour times for teachers for guaranteed opportunities for academic support. The biggest thing that I can mention on our online platforms, especially at the high school, is the notion that we're simply not going to be able to offer all of the dramatically wide variety of courses that we're able to offer during in-school attendance. Some of our classes we just can't offer for logistical reasons, such as automotive technology, manufacturing and woodworking, things such as that. And then certain courses that might be a low incidence, Greek language, or certain courses that are singletons. It's just unlikely that we're going to have the number of students necessary in order to have a full cohort doing that. So those are the big models that will be running both in the fall, and the intent would be, should we have the need to bring the entire district online and there were a large scale shutdown, we would move the entire district over to the remote learning plan that you just saw. There is also the potential for a hybrid. Should the conditions spike locally and the governor or the Department of Public Health say that they wanted us to reduce the number of students attending by 50%, we would move to a hybrid model where essentially we would have 50% of the school attending in person for a 1-week period and 50% of the school attending online for that same 1-week period, and then alternate. Those groups would be intentionally split based on kind of balancing the class between different personalities and different needs. And what our goal would be is, it's not that you have like a week on of school, a week off of school. The goal would be that we would maintain continuous progress in the curriculum regardless of whether you were home or in school. In order to do that, we would need to make sure that the instruction and the activities were planned as if it was like an online environment. We'd need to make sure that teachers were, in their daily lessoning planning, they're planning as if it's online and they have the benefit of kids coming in for check-ins. But we also need to build in time for students for teachers to be able to attend to their students that are home and not able to come in. So what that could look like is something like this, where we go to an early release Wednesday type schedule on all days of the week, shrinking our classes down to about an hour for direct, for in-person instruction, with a grab and go lunch common across somewhere near, say, 11:30 to 12 o'clock. And then the last 2 hours of that school day, teachers would have the opportunity to engage those students at home in small groups for roughly a half-hour period. We'd still be able to do what some other school districts are doing, turn the camera on when we were doing the in-class instruction. But as Tom mentioned, we really don't think that simply doing that suffices in terms of the student's ability to necessarily engage in all of the activities, to be able to ask questions, to be able to see and hear everything that's happening through a camera lens. So we feel it's important to have that ability for the teachers to be able to connect with them a little bit more personally. The last thing, definitely not the last thing, but an important thing worth mentioning in this hybrid plan is that we would also attend to special populations, our intensive academic program, intensive behavioral programs, perhaps our REACH program and some others, to where they're already a small footprint in the school, small numbers of students, and where breaking up the class in half and having them stay home a week and come in a week would be too disruptive relative to their very specific needs, and as evidenced by the very specialized programs that they're in. And so in those cases, we would look to have those students attend regularly in the event that we were in a hybrid, and that would have a minimal impact on the total footprint in the school at any given time. So those are kind of the big picture ideas. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Nelson to talk to us about special populations and special education specifically.
Just before Gretchen starts, Paul, I do just want to say specifically that hybrid plan you won't see anywhere else. I mean, you'll see aspects of it, the AB week, but when the state needs to look at scheduling, Paul Vicinius is who's called. Just as Rosina is a national expert, Paul Vicinius knows schedules like nobody I've ever met. And that creation of that hybrid plan is phenomenal, especially the lunch at the end and kids coming in, because it's really a recentering of how you think of hybrid. Hybrid people are thinking of, oh, you get some of the kids some of the time, and then the others, they're offline that week. Instead, you've got to think of it, we're always teaching our kids online in one way, but we get the opportunity to have kids in half the time too. So it's kind of a recentering and rethinking. If we do end up in a hybrid situation, I feel very confident in that plan. So thanks. Now, Gretchen, sorry.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Paul. And for everyone that went before me, because it really helps make my job a little bit easier, that they've explained all of the systems that are in place. And in terms of developing the plan for the students who have an IEP or a 504 plan, I really turned to the teachers that worked the plan in the spring for their feedback, as well as those teachers that are continuing to provide extended school year instruction over the summer. We're about to finish that program this week. And then we've also started bringing students in for one-on-one assessments. So we have done some in-person programming already, and we've learned from that. We're also looking to offer a small, very small, extended orientation program for highly at-risk students who have not been able to access as successfully as we would like their individualized education plans for the month of August, or 2 weeks in August. So I have learned a lot from these processes as we've been going on. And in special ed, we are prepared to place the safety of students and staff as our primary concern as we look to reopen. And this has driven much of our planning. So while our responsibilities under IDEA and the ADA 504 have not been absolved, federal law does provide some flexibility for how we meet the needs of students. And this is important as we consider safety requirements as outlined by the state of Connecticut. So we will look to explore and to partner with families on accommodations that will be necessary to make sure that our students have access to a free and appropriate public education. The majority of our students with IEPs and 504 plans will be able to continue to receive their services in school while observing safety measures and procedures. Their IEPs and 504s will be implemented, and their teachers will be working to make sure they can access their education. But we acknowledge that there is a subset of special education and 504 students that will require a much more individualized and intensive training program to help them learn to follow the guidelines and requirements and to engage in a positive school experience. These are also the students who have needed the most support to access online education and are in need of our intensive and individualized support in school whenever possible. So we are prepared to provide systematic and direct training for students who need this extra support. While this is happening, we will ensure that students and staff are safe through mitigating materials and procedures. An example of some of the accommodations that we will be able to implement through very thoughtful and careful scheduling: reduce class sizes for specialized instruction and related services, strategic scheduling of adults to minimize exposure to multiple cohorts, plexiglass and static partitions for staff and students, face shields, gowns, gloves, bins for individualized materials, and very importantly, very specific protocols for safety measures. These protocols are being developed with guidance from the state to identify appropriate procedures for mitigating risk and safety for educational activities per the IEP, and required exemptions according to our state guidance. This could include exemptions for specific academic interventions as required by the IEP, communication interventions, OT and PT services, and working with students who may need support to stay safe. Staff will receive training on these protocols in the use of PPE prior to the start of school through virtual professional development sessions and video training materials. Additional guidance from the State Department of Education is expected at the end of the week or next week. With an in-person program, students will continue to receive IEP and 504 services with some modifications to the structure of the cohort and block schedule model. Students in the online plan will continue to receive their IEP and 504 services with increases in synchronous, specialized instruction and related services directly related to their IEP. Should we be required to move to a hybrid plan, qualifying students will continue to receive full in-person programming. Criteria for qualifying would depend on a student's specific needs around regression data, a student's ability to independently access services, and the level of in-school supports that they currently receive. In a meeting today with the State Division Director of Special Education, Brian Klimkowitz, we learned that more specific guidance regarding essential topics, including the definition of high-need students and clearly defined guidance around meeting safety with safety requirements, pre-K guidance and distance learning requirements, timelines, and assessments is forthcoming. I expect to make adjustments to the details of my plan as new information is provided, and adjustments to the special education plan will be posted on our website as soon as they're available. Okay, and that's all I have. Thank you. So on to the next. I have this slide as well. So I had the pleasure of leading the Social and Emotional Impact Committee, and I want to thank all of the committee members for their participation. It was, I think, a very positive experience. We met several times as a large group and then have continued to meet as small groups and will continue to meet through the summer and probably into the start of the year. So these groups of stakeholders, the first question I asked them was, who's missing? Who needs to be at the table? And so we made sure that we had representation from multiple stakeholder groups, and the folks that participated provided observations and recommendations to our reopening support of students and families regarding their emotional health and well-being, acknowledging that students have been impacted by COVID and the school closure along with racial trauma. Each student's impact experience is unique, and we must prepare to meet all students where they are and support forward momentum. So with that as our charge, the stakeholders in this group included a Board of Ed member, Ari, thank you for participating, for joining us, school administrators at all three levels, teachers and parents. We had members of the EDC and the EDI join our committee and provide valuable input on social and emotional impact with an equity lens. Additionally, I share information and progress with our Director of Equity Advancement, Rosina, almost daily, and she brings concerns and questions from her committee back to the the Social and Emotional Impact Committee. So in that, we have been collaborating from day one. Input from all of the stakeholders in both of these groups have contributed to the plan. The Social and Emotional Impact team has provided recommendations for an expanded orientation, which includes selected in-person or virtual and written communications, embedded social and emotional learning instruction within various structures pre-K through post-secondary, enhanced classroom management with an emphasis on community building, a review of discipline procedures to focus on restorative concepts, trauma, stress, and informed practices, enhanced behavioral and mental health support practices, strengthened parent-school communication and collaboration, and professional development opportunities for both staff and families. Our blueprint outlines the recommendations, but the real work is still happening as the elementary and secondary teams are currently developing action plans and resources. Our committee members continue to work on these action plans, and they will do so until school starts. It is our goal to facilitate equitable access for all students by addressing their unique circumstances and their unique needs. All right, thank you.
Good evening, members of the board and any viewing public still tuned in. I have the privilege tonight to report on the work of the Community Outreach Advisory. And I just can't say it enough that I'm appreciative to have the benefit of this diverse, highly skilled and brilliant think tank. We have truly focused our discussions and attention on full, safe, and equitable participation, whether students are returning to our brick and mortar physical spaces or to the virtual environment. And our discussions truly have been strategic in planning and showing concern and care for the underserved, underrepresented, and marginalized students and families. So I want to pause just for a moment because I do want to acknowledge the public comments because at the June board meeting, we heard similar public comments. And I think that on that evening, I must have looked so worn and weary because at least that's what my relatives who watch from West Hartford and North Carolina told me. But I hope that if they've tuned in this evening and really listened to the public comments, I hope that they could see in my face just a growing sense of relief and empowerment as I listen to the parents and in particular the student voices. So, I want to say that I am grateful for this incredible groundswell of public support for our work and demand for real, deep, and sustainable change. If we were celebrating right now, that just wouldn't be right. So it does have me thinking, though, about how our discussions in these advisories and the energy around reopening schools are and can still be opportunities for all of us to position ourselves in this work for safe and equitable participation. And I agree that it can't be the work of like one Black woman, and it hasn't been. But as a leader in this work, I am charged with, really building the capacity for this work to dismantle racist, oppressive, and unjust systems in what I think are courageous and anti-racist ways for it to be effective. So I needed to just get that off my mind. But one more thing before I transition to my report, I do want to say something to Tom because I can't get up and walk across the room right now. And respectfully, as my leader, my colleague, my mentor, my friend, I don't feel defensive or offended because a parent group that I met with might have felt that a meeting with me was insufficient. I do think that most people regard you as I do, as a brave and bold change agent for what's ethically and morally right for kids and families. And honestly, if I didn't work next door with you in the same suite, I'd be banging on your door to meet with you because you give us hope more. So I hope you hear that and know that. And I say to all the parents and students that thank you just for tuning in and for speaking up instead of tuning out and being silent. So I want to share how we have organized our work on the Community Outreach Advisory. And I'm going to try not to repeat too much of what others have already said, because there really is great overlap among the advisories. We have organized our efforts and planning into two bodies of work. The first involves a multi-phase process of raising equity-focused inquiries that touch across all of the advisories, all the program areas of school operations and health and safety provisions. We've used live and shared kind of coded system for directing our inquiries to the appropriate sister or sibling advisories. Gretchen in particular has been so gracious in receiving, our questions and our requests and recommendations, and just, responding and reporting back on the status of those inquiries amongst ourselves. And then our second charge involves more strategic planning to ensure deep and wide reach to primary stakeholders, being our students and their families, and then the secondary stakeholder groups being our community partners. So on the next two slides, I will share some of the responses that we have received, actions taken, and measures in place as part of our first change. And I'll also share specifics of our strategic outreach communication plan. So throughout the reopening schools process, the Community Outreach Advisory has really focused on raising really challenging and productive questions. They've rendered very sound cautions, and they've signaled thoughtful implications and have offered practical recommendations to support and inform the work of all of our committees, and as Gretchen said, with an equity lens. And so safety remains our number one priority above everything else. And so we know that we don't need brain research to tell us that students just cannot learn unless they feel safe, connected, and a sense of belonging. It's just unhealthy to always live in a constant state of fight or flight. So, and for our educators too, we know that. So it's important for me to reiterate that we know fully well it is imperative that we give attention not only to the traumas of this present global health crisis, but also close and ongoing attention to dismantling multiple forms of racism, oppression, human injustice, and trauma of these acts, as well as the systems which they breed. And we know that parents and caregivers, they need our assurances and partnerships with our schools that facilitate measures to keep our students safe. So with that said, our advisory, we have weighed in on proactive and responsive measures for positive, safe, and healthy school climates. So one part of that involves, as Gretchen talked about, the social emotional learning. We couple that with anti-bias, anti-racist, and social justice education, as Paul referred to, and across all grade levels, building levels, and in various classroom and school-wide community settings. And more explicitly, this teaching involves really empowering students and showing them how to see and name and challenge all forms of racism, discrimination, and oppression and injustice. And then we ensure alignment with our recently released commitment to equity and racism. And we make some promises, as Giga Bellen mentioned, and we're going to act accordingly. And so this is one way. Another important component of our safe school climate measures include reviewing our expectations and reinforcing policies on prohibition against discrimination and bullying. For students to know where to go for help when behaviors of concern arise are really important considerations for the members of our advisories. So here's what parents and students can expect. As we do annually during the first week of school, and we'll do it throughout the year, as Andy mentioned, teachers and administrators will conduct a review of discipline procedures, and that will include reporting protocols, whether it's in school or online, whether it's direct or anonymous reporting. We want to talk this year more about investigation, like how we really take reports seriously, because it's really important for students to feel like they've been heard and it's being addressed. And then our responsive actions are not limited to restorative and collaborative student-focused problem solving. And the other part of that is that we will review our school support resources, and there are plenty. But we want to make sure that students know where to go, how to access them, how to seek help for themselves or for others, how to access those support resources, and like when to do it. Like, don't wait. Always feel like there's someone there for you. And we have provided our sibling advisories input on orientation events, transition events that will allow, students who are transitioning to new grade levels in new buildings, and it allows them to meet new teachers and review the grade level expectations, and they'll be virtual and live or pre-recorded. But it also allows for the introduction of new faces without masks, so people can really see each other. And we are encouraged to know from our other advisories that there will be opportunities for parents to share experiences and concerns and goals for their children in the upcoming year. We were heard in one of our recommendations, and that was to expand the parent PD offerings that we piloted in the spring at the secondary level. We paused because we thought, well, we're talking about Google Meet, and we don't know that. We realize not every parent knows what that is or how to use it, how to access it. How does this work? Turning the camera on and off and muting. And so we paused to have a parent PD session on that. And so we saw some benefits of that. So we really want to expand that, and we've got lots of interest across the advisories to do that. The next item I want to talk about is the remote learning. In addition to the social, emotional, and mental health supports that Gretchen and her team have outlined, we must ensure that students have essential technologies and material so that they can really be a part of a positive and productive learning environment, a learning culture when they're home. So we do have assurances by our IT department, and Jared Moore, and our IT director, is on our advisory as well. We are well equipped to distribute technology and provide free Wi-Fi access to families with need more seamlessly than we did back in March and April. So deployment of Chromebooks and iPads and mobile hotspots and other devices will be publicized and available to families. And when we are examining or have been examining our remote learning plans, we've reflected on the various home dynamics and circumstances that play significant roles and the efficacy of student learning. So we are using what we learned from the spring school closure to suggest solutions and resources that are flexible and accommodate differences in learning and variations within family households. One other thing what we found to be interesting is how parent and teacher conferences used to be constrained by time and location and transportation. And it's a wonder now how this virtual platform we've had for quite some time has largely removed those barriers and constraints that in-person conferences once presented. So we are reminded to think about better utilization of our current resources like Power School and Seesaw and Class Dojo, Remind, and Explore, and the list goes on and on. And finally, while many of us don't have landlines anymore, I don't, but the phone is still hanging on the wall. Traditional phone calls and email, it's still important. The personalization is just really important. So those are just a few family supports, offering that help desk for support when families need it with technology pieces. And again, our parent caregiver virtual workshops and information sessions will be designed and offered on various topics of need and interest. We are going to do our very best to publicize one-stop shopping kinds of resources for crisis services, mental health, healthcare, legal, grief, loss, food insecurity. I mean, the list is long, but we want to really access some of our community members who can help us find and identify specialized services that support our BIPOC communities. So we want to access that.
Rosina, this might be a good time to also talk about the additions in your department.
I am. Okay. I'm just going to do nutrition services, which is the last one on this page. And I'm going to transition to that because my title has been used differently twice tonight. But finally, just in this section, I do want to discuss nutrition services because 27% of our students meet the eligibility criteria for free and reduced price lunch. And our committee was very concerned about ensuring that our district follow all the eligibility and operational requirements of the federal state nutrition program guidelines. We have Tim Przenski, our nutrition services director, on our advisory. So all students that receive in-person instruction will have the option to have meals provided to them during the school day, or they can bring their own bag meals and snacks. And we will continue to provide fresh and shelf-stable hot and cold meals. So students who are regular paying students will be provided the option to purchase meals, and students who are enrolled in the free and reduced lunch program will receive meals at no cost or reduced cost. So on the next slide, I do want to talk about the ways that we aim to share this information, all of this information with our students, parents, and caregivers, and family members. So we recognize that this year will not be a smooth or easy one, but I'm confident we can get through it if we're united in our aim for full, safe, and equitable participation. So one community, 1 year is a theme that our committee selected for Reopening Schools 2020. And the one community conveys a message of unity and lifting each other up. And 1 year recognizes that there will be challenges and sacrifices that we all have to make. But I want to quote one of our parent partners, Tricia Pitter, who spoke earlier in her public comment, Aiken parent, and she so eloquently framed our theme. She says, "This will be a year of healing, recovery, and reimagining that will lead to sustainable change for the well-being and equity of our community." So if you think of it as 1 year, 2021, seems manageable, it's more impactful to think of the lasting change that our collective efforts can produce over the course of a year. Our message content is, it's simple. It's grounded in full, safe, and equitable measures for participation, but there are key messages that we want to reach. We want to reach all community members, like the health and safety rationale about why do we have to wear a face mask, and the health and safety how to put it the correct way to wear it and handle it. And then equally important, the positive and safe school climate measures that Gretchen and I both mentioned earlier. We want to, we've identified a primary audience being our parents and our students, but we want to think outside of our town line. We want to ensure that our students, West Hartford Public School students who reside in Hartford and attend our schools through the Open Choice School Integration Program, are included. I mean, they make significant sacrifices to enrich our schools and to be enriched by our schools. Similarly, our half-day magnet students who travel to other towns for their education, they need to be in the know too. Now they're navigating between, two districts. And we've been really trying hard to acknowledge the loudest voices, but also center ourselves to seek out those who are underrepresented, underserved, and marginalized. So our committee does meet live and asynchronously. We have a shared drive, as I mentioned, to share recommendations that get us out of bed in the middle of the night, or keep us up, or make us lose sleep, or jump out of bed in the morning, but we can write that down or send it somewhere, and other people can grapple with it until we meet again. And we do have community members who bring voices to the table of those who aren't present in our meetings. The other day, I heard from a clergy on behalf of working and single parents, or we have someone who's an early learning provider, and she spoke on behalf of adult education learners. And I was just in that role last year. I hadn't really considered that. Our ESL adult learners with school-age children for whom we present a language barrier. So we're fortunate to have, those contributions on our advisory. And finally, for this communication piece, we have designed, this is what I'm most excited about, we've designed our outreach and communication strategy around multimedia, multilingual, multimodal, interactive. Like, you can read it, you can watch it, you can listen to it, you can engage in it. We are committed to expanding our reach to the BIPOC communities and hearing their voices and elevating their visibility in this too. Like I said, this is not the end, and we're going to need all hands on deck. And we have embedded in one of our later phases some time for reflection and assessment. What's working, what's not, what we can do different. And then so next week, our principals are going to be kicking off our One Community, 1 year school-based community engagement campaign. And we want everyone to see themselves in our community in the reopening schools process. We're going to make it fun, make it engaging, but make it meaningful and support our effort and aim for full, equitable, and safe participation. We recently released our anti-racism, equity and anti-racism statement, and we're grounding this work in that. So I think we're gonna, okay, before we segue to Paul, I want to come back to what Tom wants me to talk about. So we've heard my title, or heard me referred to as Director of Equity Advancement. And so there are going to be some changes in our structures to better support our commitment. For example, my office title and my title will be Office of Equity Advancement and Director of Equity Advancement. Director of Diversity Advancement, it had its right time and its place and its purpose, and now we really need to shift and deepen our focus. Language matters. But in addition, I'm also excited that we know that there's so much work to do in with our family school partnerships. So we've gained, some really, you heard them say earlier, we gained some nice synergy in the winter before we were handed this pandemic. But I'm happy to announce that joining me to focus more intentionally on family and school partnerships is Dr. Scott Ratchford as an educator on special assignment for equity advancement. And Scott Ratchford is coming to us from King Philip Middle School as a school psychologist, well known and respected, but he has served effectively in other leadership roles in our district and outside of our district. He's come back home. He's really focused and energized around this work. And he brings to our redefined anti-racist structure for equity, diversity, and full inclusion an extensive knowledge and experience relevant to family and school community partnerships. So he has served for the last 2 years on our EDC Family and Community Engagement Subcommittee as the chair, and he's led our district through the Welcoming Schools assessment process along other family partnership processes and activities at KP. So later next month or earlier next month, Dr. Ratchford and I will be reaching out to all of the parent and community groups that have supported our work. I've developed a contact list. There are 10 of those groups that we talk regularly, but they support, and we want to listen, we want to work with them, we want to listen to learn, and really engage in some strategies to strengthen our partnership, to set some goals for deep change. And we are talking about, a process and a framework for transparency and accountability to shape our new structure and our new mission. So I close with saying that I am committed and I'm in this all the way. I'll give it to you, Rick.
Thanks, Rosina. Good evening.
Hold on, not so fast, Rick.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, one quick one. And I'll just take 1 minute. Hard to follow Rosina, but it was nice to hear one of the parents who spoke earlier talk about the importance of the work that Rosina leads for us as a district. And wouldn't it be great if it were integrated into the curriculum, into our systems? And I just want to point out, I hope you heard how, yes, of course, and that is the work that we do, and it relates to the slide on professional development. But when you hear about all that, you hear about how that work will intertwine with specialized programming, with the curriculum, with classroom management, with behavioral policies, with student and staff conversations, with parental and community conversations. There's a dramatic need for ongoing professional learning. Tom already mentioned the fall teacher work days, so I won't reiterate that. There's also summer opportunities that we've been working on that touch not only on this work and our planning, as you heard Gretchen say, some curriculum writing that relates even to our social emotional learning that's happening. But we do have teachers involved in ongoing summer professional learning. They're volunteering their time. We have 5 full days of teacher workshops at the beginning of the year to bring them up to speed, not only on this anti-racism, which is dramatic enough, the social emotional learning, the pieces that you heard relative to structured classroom activities, how it interplays with their classroom management, how it interplays with proactive behavior management, and the various clinical supports. We have technology integration that we're working on, safety protocols that you heard that we need to educate our teachers about and how to educate students about. We have block scheduling, which will be new, how to adjust your pedagogy and your teaching style in an environment of physical distancing, and what those curriculum revisions are in order to afford the time for these new pieces. All of that will be part of our ongoing professional development on CSI Wednesdays, and we're dramatically thankful for the support of the board to be able to do that, because with the volume of priorities that we have in front of us, that structure that West Hartford is known for and unique for with professional learning is just pivotal to our success. So with that, I'll turn it to Rick.
Thanks, Paul. And good evening, everyone. As we have learned tonight, we know that as of now anyways, a majority of our students will be in school, with a smaller percentage opting for our online model. This, of course, creates a challenge from a staffing point, as Tom indicated in his opening. If, for example, we need 25 teachers to teach online, we're going to need 25 teachers to replace them in the classroom. First, our strategy to fill the online teaching spots will be to utilize our current teachers who've requested to teach online. Over the last couple of weeks, we've talked with about 50 staff members who've expressed concerns about returning. We will make every effort to grant requests from faculty and staff to work or teach remotely, or for other reasonable accommodations in light of this pandemic. We're very mindful that individual circumstances make some individuals more vulnerable than others to the effects of this disease. And as always, employees entitled to reasonable accommodations under the ADA will receive them. Beyond that, we're going to prioritize requests from those who are at higher risk for severe illness, as well as anyone with a household member at higher risk. Outside of those categories, we'll make every effort to grant reasonable modification requests. For example, we do have staff who may not have an underlying health condition, but they're simply not comfortable working in this environment. If there's not an online option available for them, we'll grant these individuals a leave of absence. Now, ideally, the number of staff requesting accommodations will match the number of online teaching assignments that we have. If that doesn't happen, we will work very closely with the WHEA to prioritize these requests. Now, knowing we need to hire, ideally, most likely a couple dozen new teachers, we posted several positions in anticipation of these openings. With the board's approval of delaying the first day of school to September 8th, thank you, by the way, we now have 6.5 weeks to hire and onboard these teachers. Not ideal, but we have the leadership team and the teachers to help us with that, and we know that we will have every classroom fully staffed for the first day of school. That's where we are. Now, the Connecticut State Department of Education has provided districts with a tremendous amount of flexibility in the event that we're struggling to find teachers by amending their guidelines for hiring long-term substitutes and for teachers in shortage areas like bilingual education, special education, math, and science. So that'll be helpful if we've run into any issues there. Another area that the Connecticut State Department of Ed has helped with is allowing districts to hire daily substitutes without an undergraduate degree. So we're going to be recruiting college students who are majoring in education or who have significant experience working with students to supplement our current substitute pool in anticipation of increased staff absences. We've also started hiring additional teaching assistants for each building, and their roles in each of our buildings will be to serve as daily substitutes. This will also help to have the same team in the building every day and not rely solely on daily substitutes who may be moving from school to school on a daily basis, though we know that will happen to a certain degree based on our daily absence rate. So while we're talking about absences, if we can just turn to the next slide, Paul, if you're, there you go. Now, one of the things Andy summarized in the work of his committee is we will be asking employees to monitor their own health every day by reviewing a checklist with a series of a dozen or so health-related questions. If we answer yes to any question, we have to stay home, period. We will stress this before the school year starts and every day we are in school. This plan that we're talking about this evening, our plan only works if we continuously monitor our own health and stay home when we're not feeling well, particularly if we're displaying any of the symptoms associated with COVID. Our Employee Workplace Safety Committee is presently working on a COVID-19 leave policy that will provide our staff with the greatest degree of flexibility while also adhering to the EEOC and ADA. We do not want people who do not have accumulated sick leave balances to come to work if they're not sick. We want them to stay home, get well, and our policy allows them to do that without worrying about sick leave time. So for example, this question came up earlier. If someone contracts COVID or they've been exposed to COVID, they will quarantine at home for 14 days. And that time will be covered under the Family First Coronavirus Rights Act. Our Employee Workplace Safety Committee is also working on Safe Workplace Policy, which addresses the safest and cleanest work environment for our employees to work in. It will address the use of PPE and how to clean PPE. It'll address social and physical distancing. Our committee is also working on a travel policy which addresses the mandatory quarantine required for individuals who travel to one of the 31 states that increased from 22 to 31 today under Governor Lamont's executive order. So as folks know, if a resident or an employee, most importantly, travels to one of these states, they're required to quarantine for 14 days. We will be monitoring this and we will be enforcing this order. In terms of training, everything we've discussed tonight, Paul talked a lot about the PD, but certainly from a safety standpoint, that will be rolled into all of our professional development. And that goes beyond words in this presentation or a policy. Those first few days of the school year, thank you again, will allow us to address all of the PD that's related to training and safety and health and wellness. When do I stay home? How do I properly wear a mask and clean a mask? How do I safely and appropriately wash my hands? How do I safely remove and clean my gloves? So all of those things and everything else that's been mentioned tonight will be addressed in our training, and that'll occur during that first week of the school year, certainly. And then as we're onboarding folks throughout the school year, because that will happen inevitably, they will be brought into that training as well. And that includes all of our daily subs who will be working in our buildings every day. So in closing out my portion of the presentation, I think Amanda said this a lot more eloquently than I can at the beginning of the presentation tonight. We've talked a lot about student social, emotional, and well-being. Rosina, Gretchen, Paul have all touched on that, but I wanted to take a moment to remind our staff, these are stressful times for everyone. And as adults, we need to take care of ourselves. Most importantly, and with the help of our EAP, which is done through the Lexington group, we're going to be providing our employees with strategies and programming that we can implement to make sure we're taking care of ourselves every single day so that we're in a position to help our students day in and day out and provide that most positive as possible of a school and a classroom culture for our kids to learn in. So that wraps up my piece. I don't know, Tom, I'll turn it back to you for any closing comments.
Thanks. Yeah. We'll open it up to questions now. And, but before I do, I hope you sense, because I lecture my leadership staff not to ever be defensive, that it's our enemy. And I hope you see why I was defensive, not just because of the work itself, but the people that did it. And like I said, 3 weeks, this was presented over 2 hours. There's about 50 pages coming out Thursday. I don't know how long it'll be once it's formatted, or all this is also detailed. It'll be put out in multiple languages to reflect the 70 different languages spoken in the homes of our community. We will make sure we get it out to people. And here's the piece now. And you know what the truth is? The irony of anybody feeling like I'll meet with anybody. People will tell you, I love to hear myself talk and I like listening. I just can't do it in July. That's been the thing. Because now with this creation, with this rollout, and I'm rolling it out with different groups this week, and we'll send it out this week. Now a lot of the work goes out to our schools, which is appropriate because that's where our kids are home. And that is contacting from the principals about we need to know what people's choices are more fully now. But it's also about this is what lineup looks like here. This is what our classroom looks like here. This is what recess looks like here. For Julio and Dan, student involvement from this point forward is intense as they meet with their various committees. That's where we're going forward. We had to get this document out. And for people that thought the process was too rushed, if you think you thought it was too rushed, how do you think I feel? Like I said, we had 3 weeks. And the fact is, there's one other thing I should say. The governor said today, this is the plan, we'll make a decision in August. So I kind of thought the decision had been made, but that could change. And I just hope it's made sooner rather than later. And I know we want to wait as long as possible, but we have real decisions we have to make about spending, about staffing, about physical locations that can't really wait. So we have to go forward with some operational. Now, the one thing I will say, there are people that have said to me, won't you be ticked off if you did all this work to do a reopening plan and then it becomes virtual right away or it goes hybrid right away? No, we're going to be in school someday. We're going to be in school someday. And we're going to welcome kids back someday. And we don't know how long this is going to last, but it's going to end at some point. We're going to learn to live with it better. There are currently 23 different vaccines in global health trials right now. I'm a big believer in science because I'm a big believer in education. See that when people say to me, why are you so intense about trying to get this going? It's because education's the answer. Education's the answer for equity. I've said this before. The difference in the protest movement this time is that for 40 years, 50 years, kids have been taught that the civil rights movement leaders were heroes. Martin Luther King Jr., at the time of his assassination, people talk about the holiday now. At the time of his assassination, he only had approval of 35% of the population, according to Gallup polls. Other people thought of him as a rabble-rouser. Now he's a hero, and we see it in our kids. And we see it in this movement on the streets today. And we see it on people demanding justice and demanding equity. So anybody that wants to help us get to equity, we're all in. We're all in. But before we can get to equity, we got to get in. We got to get in somehow. We got to find a way to make sure we're reaching all of our kids, all of our families, every day. Every district says they're proud of their plan. Some places hire outside consultants to write their plan. I know they do, and I know the price. That's not what we do. I am so fortunate to be lifted up by the experts that just presented before you. And they did an unbelievable job because the truth is, I'm a piker who believes in a few things. I'm a plumber's son who education saved my life. These people are geniuses at their work. And I'm so fortunate to be uplifted by them. And I just hope the people of West Hartford understand the work, the effort, the diligence that's gone into this. And I hope our teachers understand, we get it. We understand your fears. I get it. And we're here to help and to do everything we can to make sure that this year, one community, one message, one voice, that we come together, that we get better, and that we do all we can to educate our kids the best they can, no matter what method we're in. So with that, I'll take questions, but I'm going to defer most of your questions to the people that are the experts instead of just rambling on myself. So, Deb?
All right, great. So if you have a question, just put a question mark in the box. I'll do my best to call on you in order. And as a reminder to board members, before you ask your question, please state your name so that those who are on the phone don't have the benefit of seeing your name underneath your face, know who you are. No one has any questions? No board members have any questions? That can't be true.
Sounds good to me, Deb. Let's go.
Is it just that it's so late? Really? No one has questions? Okay, Amanda. Oh, sorry. Yep. All right. We'll do Amanda, then Ari, and then Mark. They all came in at the same time.
Okay. Hi. No, I think we were just waiting just to make sure that other people had a chance. So we have read the plan in its entirety, not the highlights that we went over tonight. So we know, and we have the benefit, having seen this process from the back end, of feeling so much more comfortable with this than the community would have the opportunity to, because we've seen it along the way. So I know that I sit here as a parent of 2 children feeling no hesitation whatsoever about how we can move through this year, and that it is a distinct year. I don't have a question at this point, because most of my questions are going to be probably covered by other people. But I want to say, the teacher side of me, when I was reading through this plan and I got to the pieces about block scheduling and the smaller class sizes and more frequent time outside, more frequent time, spending time with cohorts of people, it reminded me of when I taught with block scheduling, and there are fewer transitions throughout the day. The pace of the day is so much slower. The learning is so much deeper. And there were so many times when I stopped as I was reading that plan and thought that we are going to see some added benefits out of this that are unexpected, because as we take time to care for the social emotional needs of our children and our staff, the pace of the day in and of itself is going to be slower, and they are going to be outside more. And even though it's winter, people experience winter in Minnesota and Michigan and other states and do things outside. It's not something that we have to fear as much as we do here in New England. But that pace of the day in and of itself is also another support. And there are some very significant learning things that are going to come from that. So one of the first things I wanted to mention was that I appreciate some of that planning from a curricular standpoint, but also from a support of social emotional health. And we also haven't met since graduation. And I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that, you were tasked with creating that bright spot for our kids who are graduating this year, and you did it. And it was amazing. And it was a bright spot for the whole community. And I don't want us to forget that there have been really special moments that have come from all of this that you've created for our community. And that is also going to happen this year. So it's going to be a different year, but it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be good moments in it. So I think my specific question is really, parents, and we've gotten a lot of notes personally and as a board about the different pieces that they're curious about that are specific to their ages, their kids, their classrooms. When will that communication turn over to the, I'm assuming to the principals, so that they can start getting the answers and they can start asking those questions? Because we don't have time this evening, because it would take us several hours to go through all of those individual questions that people really would love to know the answers to. But I think what they're really wondering is, when are we going to make that transition so that they can ask? For instance, for the little ones, you know, how will young children be comforted in those early days of school with social distancing? Things like that that are specific to the little ones.
Yeah, I can, you know, I'll jump in first, and anybody else that wants to talk about it. So the plan this week is we've had to scrub our response list, because as we put out the request and then we had our building principals call, some people responded twice, making sure that we knew. And so we had to go through and remove every duplicate, and we had to do that by hand over the weekend. And actually, I think we just finished that tonight. So now we have to turn over those lists to the principals at each individual school. And so once the plan goes out on Thursday, at the end of this week, they'll begin the process of reaching out to their school communities, both with messaging and also with targeted questions for individuals that are okay. For some reason you didn't respond, just so you know, here's our plan, maybe another link, and we need to know because we have to settle our class lists. So those kind of questions, that's when it's going to be shifting. Basically, the end of this week into next week is when it shifts to the local, although, of course, they're going to be inundated right away. And Rosina, you have some communication ideas about this also. We've been talking about how parents can reach out a little bit, and I don't know if you want to add in.
Oh, you're gonna steal the thunder of. We're gonna have there's gonna be lots of videos. Like I said, it's just gonna be very, very interactive. And thank you, Tom, for doing the first demonstration of the masks, the different masks, because that's been on people's minds. But our principals are going to be giving virtual tours of the building so that families and students can see, you know, what is spacing? When they say spacing, what does that really look like? Because it's going to look very different. Andy alluded to that. And so just kind of trying to acclimate them. But there's just a lot of, I think there's a lot of good energy around it. We know that there's angst, and some people are just very eager. So we want to just be mindful of all of that. And it's 1 year. And I think we can see some really lasting good change come out of it.
All right, we'll go to Ari and then Mark.
Okay. Again, I just want to reiterate what Amanda said. I'm amazed at the plan that you guys were able to put together in 3 weeks. Super comprehensive. Again, I did feel a little lucky to have some insight into the plan, and it helped with my confidence as a parent, you know, to be confident in sending my son back to Hall next year. So I'm excited for other parents in the town to have this exposure so that they can know what's happening and feel as confident as I do. So my question, again, knowing my background, you can probably predict. In terms of the PD days, professional development days, I'm just wondering, have they already been kind of scheduled and planned in terms of what will be presented to the teachers? And if not, is there going to be some specific training to help teachers with regard to their confidence and abilities to assess and address mental health issues in their students, something like a mental health first aid or something to assist them in that level of confidence? Because as we know, I think we're going to have an influx of students who are experiencing some significant emotional behavioral issues and concerns.
Tom, is it okay if I address this?
By all means, I was hoping you would.
Okay. So Ari, every year our teachers go through training on how to identify students that are at risk and a review of our referral systems and our referral processes. And so as we enhance that professional development this year, we will include many other factors with regard to new information that we've learned, new information in terms of COVID impact, of racial trauma. All of those factors will be included in that. We are also looking at a screening tool that we will use for most students or all students in terms of social and emotional learning needs. So very different from mental health needs. We want to make sure that anyone who's doing any type of screening is qualified to respond appropriately to mental health. But in terms of social and emotional impact and needs, the state has introduced the idea of a universal screening, and if they can get it to us in time, that will be fantastic. In the meantime, I've been looking into a backup plan for that. So I think it's really important that we identify those needs, not only to make sure we're providing the appropriate resources, but also to look at it in terms of a baseline, because we want to make sure that what we're doing well, and we're taking a look at that. So those are all pieces that will be put in place.
Thank you.
And if I can piggyback one thing, just to remind the board, Gretchen, I think you reported on this last year. We had started work with trauma-informed instruction. There was a train-the-trainer model where we got our clinicians positioned to be trainers. And our original plan before COVID, before everything else, was turnkeying that. And so there are those pieces that are already developed and fairly in place.
And I appreciate the board support. One of the things that I don't want to get lost is that, assuming we're back, everybody back, we'll follow the regular schedule. So Wednesdays will continue to be professional development because it's so important. We have so much that we need to work with our teachers for this year to respect them as professionals, make sure they get that PD. And so that's one of the things I greatly appreciate the board continuing to support, as does Paul.
Tom, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the $20,000 grant from the Foundation for West Hartford Public Schools to really support this deep equity and anti-racist work. And so we a team and myself, we attended a virtual, really powerful PD last week and this week. And what I was most impressed with was the student participation and the student voices and educators learning with students. So it generated some really good ideas for how we can better work with our students and partner with them in this journey.
Okay, Mark and then Lorna.
Thank you. I may have some microphone issues, so if I seem like I'm yelling, I'm really not. I'm just trying to really talk loudly. But I got a few comments and I've got a few questions. I was saddened at the beginning of this meeting because I know, and some of the issues that came out, I know how hard Rosina works and how ahead of the game we are with so much on the diversity that people were calling it out. And I know that we're ahead of the game by tenfold. Continuous improvement is our model, and I know that we will obviously follow that. I was just kind of perplexed because we're a leader. You know, I often said in a lot of meetings in the past, we're either a leader or a follower. There's sometimes we lead, and there's sometimes you have to follow. But in that particular, on our diversity and equity with Rosina at the head of it, she does an unbelievable job. And I hope you didn't take any of that personally. I still think that we're still ahead of the game. I know we're ahead of the game. And there's a continuous improvement model that we've all got to improve on. So I just want to say that. They talked on the professional development. If we go back to school, I think professional development is what differentiates us from the rest of our cohorts. You know, that's why West Hartford leads our school systems. And I think a lot of it has to do with professional development on Wednesday. So I think that's something that if we go back to school full time, I'm glad to hear that we're going to continue that. Graduation, and I want to just, Amanda approach this and mention something, but as a senior dad, I just want to tell you, the graduation and the parades and everything that was planned, it may not have been what every graduate expected, but it's something they'll remember for the rest of their life. And the planning that went into this, from everybody on this, and in the principals and everything, it was unbelievable. It was something they will remember for life. You know, I said this in my speech, you know, we're going to remember the class of 2020, and it's because of the way we did things different. And we thought out of the box. This is our first opportunity to talk about it, and I want to say thank you for that. The amount of planning that Tom and your team did in the last 3 weeks, and the document, I actually had a meeting with the Crown Committee last night, and you sent out that 50-something page document. Truth be told, I'm on vacation up here, and I didn't quite be able to read the whole thing, but I did peruse it last night, and I read it today. Unbelievable planning, and I want to congratulate all of you. I know you really don't need the accolades, but I'd be remiss if I didn't. Because of the planning that you guys did in this last 3 weeks, it has to be said, and thank you. My job, our job, is so much easier because of what you're doing and how you're doing it. I want to thank you for that. So now questions kind of, Tom, when we go back, and I don't know if it's Tom or a legal issue, when we do go back, I just, there's other places on civilian jobs and such that are hold harmless agreements that when you come into school, if potentially someone catches COVID and they think that they catch it at school, that hopefully they can't sue our school or sue our administration and the Board of Ed. And if there's something in, you got to do that, the motion. Tom, you got to start moving more. You got to. But is there a hold harmless? And I've got more questions, but I'll wait till it have this response. Something that holds us harmless against any, if we go back to school full time.
I'll jump in and then Andy can join in because that's one of the other things as this is all going on, this is a planning decision, but there's also all the legal components that we had to follow going through this. So individually, there's a hold harmless unless gross negligence is proven. You'd have to do something outside of the realm of what would be typical. Before Andy will answer the next part better. Here's the truth. There are people that operate in fear and their plans don't say anything. Like their plans are just clinical. I can tell you about masks. There's nobody saying the exact same things I am. They're like, you can't say that. You might get sued. Okay. I mean, that's just where we are right now. Because there's things that we have to do to keep people safe. And there's going to be issues that arise that will lead to, if there is a child with disabilities, there's a question. I had a long legal meeting with this today, and Gretchen continues to have meetings about this. And we are mandated to provide an education to them. And then that question also becomes, but what if there's safety issues to others that are created, and how do we balance that? So there are infinite legal issues. The meeting was with Tom Mooney today to all Hartford area superintendents. Tom Mooney's our board attorney. And that's probably the fourth meeting he's had with large groups in addition to individual calls from me and Andy. Andy, is there anything I left out about that?
Thanks, Tom. Not really, Mark. One of the benefits, if you remember, as a board, we talked about last year, and Mark, I know you were involved when you were on the policy committee, is changing over to using Shipman's policy book, and really the benefits that puts us in as far as compliance and making sure we're on solid footing. And so we've been working this summer, and we'll continue to work with Shipman and Goodwin with Jess Ritter, and they've already established and sent out their preliminary COVID-19 emergency policy packets that they're planning to put in place come the start of the school year for all of the districts that cover a lot of that legal changes that we've talked about, whether it's health and safety, whether it's mental health, whether it's discipline. It covers a lot of what Rick and I are working on with the unions, a lot of those underlying policies that we then don't have to go ahead and try and to worry about because they're taking care of that.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. And then, Paul, this may be your question, if not, but the block scheduling, you talked about automotive and Greek not being able to be offered. Is that because people are interested in it? What's the premise behind that? I know Greek in the past have been, and quite honestly, I think automotive have been, and those are, I think, the two examples you used, so forgive me if there were more, but I think those were the two, and I remember them being pretty robust as far as people attending. So I'm wondering, how's the block scheduling affect that?
Sure. I apologize if that was unclear on my part. That's not actually a block scheduling constraint. That's a remote at-home learning constraint. So if I'm choosing not to come into school and I'm getting my instruction online, obviously the automotive shop, I don't have the ability to teach that. So that's what I was referencing. During the in-person school, we definitely have, sufficient numbers for, for courses, same as we always would in any given year. So that was really just trying to highlight the remote learning is going to have some restrictions on the number of courses. Now, I suppose it is possible, and we're not this far down the rabbit hole yet, as we begin to back out all of the student requests for the students, there may be an odd course here or there that doesn't have, maybe it was running low and there was only one section of it, and now it gets, now it's just too low, and we'd have to figure that out. But that was not what I meant when I said that, so I apologize. I was really talking about the remote learning.
Okay, I appreciate that. So I guess, as a automotive guy that always been do his own automotive, I always go online to figure out how to fix things. I don't know if that's an option, and I'm not even going to ask you to answer that, but just as a comment. But then as the block lunching, I'm looking at it because all previously, I always remember, and what I bring to the table is that athletes always had a tough time with lunch. And now that I see this block scheduling that potentially can happen, is that lunches are all pretty equal around noon, which is always great for athletes because there are people eating at 9:45, I believe, and it wasn't always a great thing. And a lot of teachers wouldn't let some of the athletes eat in class, and I don't even mean athletes, but anybody, because 9:45 or 10 o'clock was early to eat. And I understand that block scheduling is an option. Is that something? Well, I guess if we could meld that, say we go back to school normal and we don't have to do block, and this is a year from now, is there any way that we can meld that lunch schedule into a more advantageous, for lunch at least, for those kids? Because it's one thing that stuck out for me, I don't know why, where lunch was just a normal lunchtime.
Let me jump in. My audio lagged as you were talking, so I may have missed some of your questions. So I apologize if repeat if this doesn't answer it. In the plan, the lunch that you see, that's so the way that lunch is going to work in general in this block schedule, we have four instructional periods that are, roughly 80 or so minutes at the middle or the high school, depending on daily advisory or not. We're going to append the 30-minute period to the third period, and we will have some lunch waves only because we will have some rooms in the building where it's not appropriate for the kids to eat in that room, and so we would move those kids potentially down to a calf. We also may have some, whether it's an outdoor space or I think, Andy mentioned some potential even just for a movement break for some of our kids. Like our science classrooms are the big ones that we would we would do everything to not have kids eat in those rooms, just out of fear of any, chemicals or anything like that from labs kind of contaminating. So, so there will be different lunch waves. I could have a lunch before third period. I could have a lunch after third period, or I could have a lunch within third period to where my third period class would split. The nice thing about an 80+ minute class is it does afford sufficient time where that split doesn't really feel like a dramatic interruption. It feels almost more like an intermission. So that's our plan for lunches under the block. And I apologize for the second half to your question that my audio lagged.
Paul, I can jump in. So, Mark, I think one of the key things, so Amanda, when you were speaking and talking about the block eloquently, my bet is you enjoyed teaching in the block and like teaching in the block. One of the key elements about block scheduling is there are true believers that love it, and there are people that hate it, and I'm an agnostic. That's really the truth. And if you were going to make a decision as a district to move towards block scheduling and have a discussion, it's a discussion. It's thought out. It's before the board. I didn't want people thinking, hey, this is Tom's way to sneak in block scheduling by doing it this year. This is about COVID. This is about this plan. If down the road at some point the board wants to talk about that, that's your purview. It's just I didn't want some people thinking that this is some secret plan of mine to get block scheduling in. It's really about this is what will work best in this situation.
No, Tom, I completely understand that, and that's not my point, I guess. It's just that I don't know why it stuck out so much, because I just remember, what I bring to the table as a dad that has kids in the system is that lunch was always a big issue back in the day, because I guess I bring in athletes to the table, is that it was difficult for them to eat and be able to perform after school and this, all that other thing, and teachers wouldn't let them eat in class. But when I saw that, it was at 12 o'clock. So I'm just saying that maybe potentially going forward, not that I'm a block advocate or not, I'm agnostic as well. It's just that maybe we can learn some lessons from that. That's all I guess I'm saying. So, but I'll move on. And then, Paul, you mentioned the 90 to 120 minutes for the online. If we do the online, if we don't go back to school, we do the online. The 90 to 120 minutes, I was kind of doing the math on my head, is it going to be more robust than what we saw earlier this spring? And is it going to be more advanced? Is it going to be the continuous improvement model if we have to go to online? Because you talked about 90 and 120, I just want to know where we fit in there.
Sure. So that 90 to 120 that you're quoting, that was the elementary minutes, and then at the high school, I believe it's upwards. It's 4 hours because those are 4 classes a day for about an hour a day. It definitely is what we're calling our online 2.0 plan, and and to all the student voices that we heard, this a lot, everything that we kept and everything that we're shifting, came out of a lot of input from those student voices about what worked for them and what would be best. And we are actually field testing our online plan, if you will, right now during the summer school, especially at the elementary level, that 90 to 120, and it's shorter. It's 90. If I'm a K or first grader, we're not gonna ask our kindergartners to sit in front of a computer and try to attend for 2 or 3 hours at a time. So that's where they have these shorter instructional blocks, but they are direct instructional blocks. They are when we went into the spring and we were doing our school closure plannings, and we were looking at the Italy model, and we were looking at other places to where COVID-19 was apparently, it appeared to us on the news, just devastating the community, and streets were empty. That was really what we expected. We expected just 20, 30, 40% of our teaching staff being unable to teach at all. And we learned from that, hey, we can have more synchronous time. Our students are going to be available. Our community is seemingly able to be able to, especially with our younger folks, attend to them and make sure that they're available online at specified hours during the day. That seemed to be the community feedback. So we're looking for those periods to be direct instructional periods, and then in addition to that, we'll have enrichment and other activities, because we're also not trying to replicate a 6-hour day online with a 5th grader. We figure 2 hours of screen time and then another hour of work that they can do independently.
Yeah, understood. Thank you, Paul. I guess the last question I have is, Tom, you talked about the money, millions of dollars, and how do we wrap our arms around that? And I know these are emergency circumstances, but as a fiscal guy, I've got to ask about that. And you know, from my past, that I'm always I'm not apprehensive about putting money in the classroom, and I'm not shy of doing that. But can you just walk us through, what kind of millions of dollars are we going to be looking at past what we passed our budget? More delineation.
Yeah, it's a fair question, and like I have to tell the parents, I don't know until I know how many teachers I have to hire. That's really what the cost is. I mean, it could be right now. My guess is $3 to $5 million, and that could go up. And I hate to say it. I mean, listen, I'm failing at my job. I'm not working within the budget. But I can't, no, I don't, I mean, I'm not saying that like, hey, okay. No, I mean, I just don't know how I can and provide a school system that's, that people expect. I mean, there has to be outside support coming to communities everywhere, because I know people that are trying to maintain inside their budget that won't get the support from West Hartford, from their citizens. I mean, one of the biggest things I've had in letters to me have been people saying, who do you need me to advocate with? Who do I need to call? How's the board? Are they gonna? And I'm like, no, the board understands this completely. And, I've tried to keep you updated every week, and more than that, weekly, with updates about this spending. I can't get around. I can't create an online school and have it be meaningful. There are places that are going to say your online school we'll turn the computer around. We can barely hear people on this sometimes. Turn the computer on, click it on, and watch that class with no interaction with the teacher, with never getting called on, and not being a part. That's not gonna, listen, I'm not critiquing. I guess inherently I am. That's not what West Hartford Public Schools is about. And I honestly believe this is another year. If there's ever going to be a year that differentiates us and people see the difference, this is something that's going to be a difference of what West Hartford provided its citizenry during this time.
Yeah, no question. And as a fiscal hawk, listen, I know we have to spend more money, and I know we have to do the right thing. So don't take the wrong message from that.
No, I think we should buy a lot of scratch tickets or something, Mark. That's what I'm left with.
I got to say, my family, and I'll share this, is I've got teachers and union members that work in Long Island. I've got administration that work in New Britain and Boston, or outside of Boston. And I can tell you what we have done is not even comparable to what they've done. I've had discussions up here. We have a lot of family up here in New Hampshire, and we talk about it all the time. I talked about it today. What we've done here in West Hartford is not even close to what they've done in Long Island, areas around us, Boston, the Boston metro area. So we are ahead of the game tenfold. And, obviously I said it earlier, Paul, is our continuous improvement model. So I just want to commend everyone on this call for all the hard work they've done, and I want to thank you. I appreciate it, and I was sat in a lot of those classes that my kids were in, and I was taken back by it. So thank you, and I'm done. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Lorna and then Jason.
Hi, yes, good evening. Thank you very much for the thorough report and presentation. I say that with great appreciation as a board member. I'm certainly being informed of the proposals moving forward. Yes, we do know that the definite plan is not known until we get guidance from our governor and the commissioner of the Department of Education. However, thank you. As a parent, I also thank you very much for the thorough information. I do have a few questions, though, and a comment. One I have in regard to recognizing having to arrange things differently in the classrooms, the 6-foot distance between desks, and accommodations made elsewhere. In terms of the staff lounge, I know different schools, the staff lounge is a rather intimate space. What accommodations will be made to support areas for the staff to be able to get recharged and relax?
Thanks, Lorna. That's actually a really good question, and it's something as we're working with each of the principals to create the plans for their building. Each building's a little bit different, and so we are identifying additional lounge areas. In many cases at the elementary level, if you think about it, if we're bringing some of the special teachers into the classroom, that frees up other classroom space and other areas that's available. At one of the elementary schools, we're going to be using one of the art rooms as some additional office space for teachers and areas like that. In some of the elementary schools, we're looking at library space being allocated for different teacher workrooms to be able to spread people out, but also have a place that they can go to when the music teacher may be in their classroom instructing.
Thank you. Second, understand from the summer school program that it was restricted just to students in district as opposed to years before where students elsewhere were able to participate. Moving into the upcoming academic school year for open choice, is that something that is going to still be entertained, or are restrictions going to be there as well?
Go ahead, Rosina.
Yeah, so open choice, when we talk about our open choice students, they are our West Hartford Public School students. So open choice, so summer school is open to them, as well as whatever they choose. They don't lose their seat if they choose to learn remotely. So they still have the opportunity to register and participate. I think we do have students from the open choice program in our summer school program. It was just anyone who's not a West Hartford Public School student, we couldn't extend that opportunity to this year. Does that answer your question, Lorna?
Wonderful, thank you. It does, and I have to be transparent. I was hoping and assuming to hear that answer to segue into this piece. In terms of transportation, I do believe it's correct that provides transportation for those students. Will those accommodations still be in play? Because I recall from years prior, there was a time where secondary students, transportation was not provided to them and they had to wait for public transportation, the bus. And fortunately, accommodations were made for them. Will that still carry forward into the upcoming school year?
As far as we know, Lorna, that is still in place. We'll continue to work with CREC as we do with all of our transportation providers to make sure that students do have a safe and stable way to get to school.
Wonderful, thank you. And third question, recognizing how different proposals have been put forth in school full-time, distance learning, and then a hybrid. In terms of whether it's a hybrid or a distance learning, and I guess this question, Gretchen, I believe this question is for you. What supports may be in place for recognize there are many outlets for students to be able to confide in either a teacher or a counselor if there is something distressing for them at home. And I know that we have the mobile app where students and parents or teachers can respond to alert of a concern they may have in someone else. Is there a way for a student to be able to confidentially reach out for supports and help? Because let's say their concerns are with the persons that are within their home over them 24/7. Is there some way for them to be able to reach out for help and support in a more confidential way?
Sure. Thank you, Lorna, for the question. So we learned a lot during the spring distance learning experience that we had. And so we had a number of students who actually sought out that individualized support during that time. And those referrals happened in many different ways. Sometimes teachers were able to pick up on a student's need for that and did an actual referral to a school clinician or a school counselor. But all of our clinicians and counselors were checking in with students in addition to their teachers. So they had one-on-one opportunities to talk to them, check in with them, see how they were doing, and see if they needed anything else. Parents could also put in referrals, and some of our adult support staff were meeting with students while they were meeting in classes and would make referrals, like they've noticed that someone has been late or they haven't been prepared or they've seen a change in behavior, which resulted in a referral. So there were many ways that support happened, but it still happened. I can tell you that a number of follow-up documentation pieces came to me in my office, so I know that we were able to then connect.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't mean to cut you off with what you were saying with the volume. So I hope I'm not interrupting you now. Did you finish?
I'm all set. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Thank you. And my last is a comment, and Tom, it's piggybacking, or I guess directing to you, but piggybacking off of something you shared, which I greatly appreciate. Actually, everyone has made reference to this moving forward in regard to the race and equity piece and how we're all charged to respond to that in an appropriate and devoted way. And Tom, you said, quote, we're all in. Before we can get to equity, we have to get in terms of getting back to school. And I agree with that. And I also want to stretch the level of charge and being in to not just only those students in school, not only the staff in school, not only the teachers and administration, but our community at large. I charge all of us as a community to be in and wanting to really respond to the needs of our students, our community, and our world at large in terms of being more equitable. And so I think the learning that takes place with that certainly exceeds beyond the walls of a classroom or beyond the screen of a computer. And it really is, it's something that behooves all of us to be invested in that. So I just want to put the onus of that responsibility on us on a larger level in terms of being more responsive and being more equitable. So again, thank you so much again for all of the work you've done. Look forward to the steps moving ahead.
Thank you. Jason and then Amanda.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This is my first Board of Ed meeting, and you might think that this is intense, that this is my second reopening. So we've already discussed UConn's opening last month. But I am very excited to see this level of detail and this level of commitment, because when people are concerned about safety, they should understand that the virus loves inequality. The virus loves discriminatory environments. That's where the virus thrives. And so I think, just to echo what other folks are saying, I think, getting back into the school is a demonstration of how we can survive this together. And so I just want to echo everyone's thanks to Tom and the team. And I have two things I was going to ask if it's sort of been addressed, but I'll ask them in a slightly different way. Just to echo from my colleague Mark, who was talking about a continuous improvement model, and I wholly agree and would love to hear about the how self-evaluation in the district is challenged by the new conditions of reopening, and if this kind of self-evaluation can address some of the concerns that the parents have raised, especially on the note of the equity audit. If that is a part of existing self-evaluations, and then how is that impeded or rethought under these reopening?
I'm going to let Rosina talk about specifically, and this is one of those things that just about an equity audit specifically, Rosina and I have had this discussion repeatedly of what's the goal, when are we doing it, how are we doing it, who's doing it. So it's definitely not a no, it's we want to do it right is kind of this piece that ties in here. I think you hit on something really, Jason, that I don't want to speak for everybody else in this committee, but the self-reflection of what does this mean for us? I'm more committed to, I like what you said about the virus, where it attacks, because I think there's a lot of kids in this town I'm not worried about if we're in virtual learning. There's a lot of people that's going to work, but we've got to give voice to the voiceless during this process. And I think that kind of self-reflection of who we are as a community, and, we talked about this before, that it's not just us. We've got to make sure we're engaging, and Rosina's work is so important because where do we fit? I brought up our per pupil expenditure for a reason, because we only talk about it at the budget time. But it is something we've got to think about as a community. What do we value and how much do we value it? And how do we advocate for it? Because I've spent time reflection. Have I fought enough? This is a deeply personal, this is my life's work. And I get, I'm the institution in a lot of ways in that I've been here 25 years and I'm in charge of it. I know the failings of this district better than anybody else does, and I'm responsible for them. And that comes with the territory. So I hope that self-reflection from each of us drives our equity work. And it's not just a self-reflection as a district, but it's a self-reflection of what am I doing? And how can I do it better? And who am I reaching? Rosina, do you want to talk more specifically about the audit or anything else you want to add?
No, I think you've said it really well, just that we have closely followed other districts in their audits. And a lot of times we've been disappointed. We've been a part of other people's audits and studies too, and I've shared that with EDI members, some examples of that. We've just been disappointed with their outcomes because it's been low-hanging fruit or things we've already done, and we really want, if we're going to do this, we want to go deeper, and we don't want to disappoint the public and the community. Oh, well, that's all that came out of it. Well, we were trying to be responsive and thoughtful. So along the way, we are instilling some other measures where we are self-reflective and we are taking a candid look at ourselves, and we are looking at our areas where there are systemic inequities and calling them and naming them and trying to do something to change. So it's not like, well, we'll just wait till something comes along. It's like, well, we can do something internally.
Yeah, thank you. I had a second question that really tracks closely with Lorna's question, and it's really about social emotional learning and the follow through for mental health. So after individuals are identified as seeking help, Gretchen, you spoke to this for the online portion, but I'm wondering if you can discuss ways that that you're thinking about how students can be what happens after individuals are flagged, and then what kinds of ways do we include their peers in kind of healthy practices? It sounds like there's a lot that you've already done, and I think just hearing I guess partially as a newcomer to understanding your guys' existing policies, but then to understand what that would look like in this context.
Thank you, Jason. So that's a big question, and I'd like to be able to take a lot of time to answer that question. I'm not sure that we have all that tonight. We have about 40 clinicians in the district, and they are supervised by a clinical supervisor. That is in addition to our school counselors that we have throughout the secondary schools. And so we have an awful lot of people on the ground who are looking to support staff and support parents in a collective effort to support students. And so we do have an at-risk policy and procedure that is reviewed and identified by that body of clinicians periodically. And then we review all of the policies and procedures as every year, as we start a new year throughout that year. Over the last few years, we've really added some robust pieces in terms of concerns about students who are at risk to self, but also at risk to others. And so we've really expanded our work there. And so our clinicians and counselors are good at following up, are very, very good, always looking to be better, but always very good at making sure that they're identifying the right factors for students so that they can tailor their referrals out even from within the school district. So we collaborate and coordinate with community providers as well as more intensive therapeutic settings to make sure that students get what they need on an individualized basis. And so we do reach out to our community. We have a very strong partnership with the Bridge, and they also provide supports within our buildings, along with PD for our teachers. They sit in on our clinical teams and provide that community input as well. So we're always open to learning new things, and we're always open to partnering with new community members, but we have a very strong clinical team. I hope that answers your question in the short term.
Yes, thank you. That's well spent.
Thank you.
Amanda.
Thank you, and I appreciate everyone's stamina. I know you haven't slept since March. I know that one of the purposes of tonight's meeting was to clarify that the charge that you were given from the governor and the commissioner of education was to come up, just like every other district, to come up with the 3 plans, and that we were hearing about those plans tonight, and that we're awaiting information about which one of those plans we're allowed to go forth with. So keeping that in mind, there's a couple of things that I just wanted to ask you to clarify for people listening who are anxious to hear an update on these things. You don't need to update us on them now, but I'm asking, when they will know. What's the status of before and after care for people who are trying to do some planning? And I know that's in the plan, but I didn't hear it come up as clearly tonight. When the community can hear about sports, and I know that is somewhat outside of our control with the CIAC, but when they can get an update on that. Andy, if you wouldn't mind, there's some information in the report that I found very reassuring about the process of signing off on different plans for the buildings that might just reassure some people. If you wouldn't mind just clarifying that small piece for us. And then just to articulate clearly for people with regard to Tricia and the process that you followed through, going through the last month or two, what that relationship has been like, just so that people can hear it. It was hard to hear it all at once, but those are the things that we've heard a lot about. If there's a way to just highlight those pieces.
I can start quickly and hopefully highlight some of the answers. As far as Tricia, Teresa's been fantastic, and Rick and I both work very closely with Teresa and the other WHEA leadership, not only on various committees, but Teresa and I have actually met at various schools with Bob Palmer, sometimes just the two of us, and we've walked through classrooms. We've really tried to give her an understanding, and I think she's really valued having that understanding, that picture in her head about what a classroom can look like at a middle school level and will look like at an elementary level, and what how we're going to format that and how we're going to structure that. And I think she's then able to better answer questions that come up to her from the various teachers. As you mentioned, as far as the sign-offs go, as we're working with the buildings and these plans, these are things that we will be reviewing with the various committees. These are things that clearly our executive team will be looking at with the principals, and making sure that the plans take into consideration all the different requirements, all the different charges. And it's also as we're going forward, we're also involving, as we mentioned, Shipman on the outside, to make sure that from a legal standpoint, when we're working with the different unions, that we're making sure we're on solid ground with all of that. I don't know if that answers those questions you had.
I think the question was about, thank you for the union question, was about the HVAC system. I know in the piece about how you're working with the outside firm that we consulted.
Yeah, one of the recommendations from the Department of Public Health is to examine HVAC systems and to look at existing systems, not with the idea, and they actually put this up front in their guidance. If anyone is interested, it's a 5-page guidance on air conditioning systems. It's all available online, and I think we link it into the report if you're looking for some light reading. But they actually talk about in their guidance that the goal is not for schools to go out and invest in costly upgrades or to add on to existing systems. Rather, it's for schools to get an understanding of their current mechanical systems and what they're capable of, to be able to adjust the function to maximize the fresh air intake and to maximize the ventilation. And so in looking at all of our buildings, we're going to go ahead and employ the HVAC engineering firms. We've worked with them in the past. They have a good understanding of how we work and how our systems are set up. And as we're developing these programs then and developing these plans for each building, we're able to work with the engineer to make sure that we're able to balance the idea of running systems for 3 hours before or 2 hours before school starts to maximize the fresh air intake. And how do we balance filtering? There's guidance in there about the proper levels of filters. Everyone has been talking about the MERV 13 filter, the minimum efficiency reporting value is MERV that everyone talks about. And the MERV 13 filter has a certain criteria for filtering certain things in. Most of our schools are operating at about a 10 currently with the filtration. One of the recommendations, and that this group will also be looking at, that we're bringing on, is how do we balance some of the higher filter needs that we're going to have? How do we change them out more efficiently? Where can we balance increasing filters to MERV 13 or thereabouts, and then not decrease the airflow rates? And so that's where we're talking with the companies and with the experts that can deal with the balancing. It's a little more complex than an average home in some of the buildings. And remember also that we have 7 elementary schools and 1 middle school that doesn't have a school-wide fresh air system. They have air conditioning in various locations. They have fresh air intake systems in various locations, but it is not a school-wide. And so how do we then balance the ventilation needs there? How do we make sure if we have known areas that might need interventions that we're able to do that? One of the things we're looking at on the second floor of Duffy, which we know is a problem spot when it becomes hot, especially the south side classrooms. We think we're going to be able to move some of those rooms in cohort areas down away from that second side of the south side of the second floor, and then bring in some portable air conditioning units when needed for some of the other classrooms. We think we're going to have enough capacity in the electrical grid to go ahead and do that on a limited basis in various sites. And so those are all things that are going into that planning that Bob and Mike Longo and all of our engineers will be working on with us.
Thank you so much, Andy. We know you're very thorough, and I think it's just nice for the community to hear pieces of that.
I appreciate that. We're becoming very good at HVAC.
Yeah.
Andy, before we go on to any other questions, I think Amanda had also asked about the CIAC and before and after school programs.
Yeah, I'll share what news we have. At this point, the guidance that we have and the way we're operating is that before and after care programs will be as they've normally been. We're reaching out and we'll continue to work with YMCA, the other providers at Morley and so forth who do this, and it's with the understanding that they're going to have to operate under the same guidelines that we do, as far as requiring masks, as far as spacing. There may be some different limitations on where they may have access to in the mornings or in the afternoons based on our cleaning needs and based on their side. But we know it's important to parents that we do everything possible to provide that before school and after school care, and we are going to do everything possible to do that. We are still waiting to hear from CIAC as far as their rulings with fall sports. I know that there is a meeting Thursday there with the athletic directors that hopefully we'll have some additional guidance on. We're told that their decision date is the first week in August for fall sports. I don't frankly see, I can see, and Tom may jump in on some of this, and I'm sure you have your own views as parents, and I do as well. I can see certain sports. I have difficulty seeing all of them based on models and based on contact. I'm a big fan of cross country. Space out and just run, Forrest, run. I think we're good. I can see some other. I can even see soccer in a limited sense because I know the leagues have opened up, and softball and baseball I think are fine. I have a hard time envisioning football, and I say that as a frustrated Notre Dame graduate who was looking forward to yet another year of disappointment watching Notre Dame get close but not cross the line, as Tom knows over the years. So that's where I think we're at with sports.
We're fortunate enough that Jason Siegel has a strong voice, and Dan Zatoon's also on the board of controls. So we do have strong discussions, and that is an area. There are areas that I will wade into, areas that I won't wade into. The governor's render unto Caesar what is Caesar's with the governor. I'm a former football coach, and I understand the sport, and I love the sport. There's certainly some concerns there. So we'll see what comes out next week, or if next week or the weekend.
Next week, or at least a couple of weeks down the road, hopefully. We are going ahead and scheduling, like we've done in the past, physicals for students who might need them and so forth. We're still going ahead under the assumption that if athletes will need that, we're going to go ahead and provide it, but we're not sure what it's going to look like yet.
And I should point out, a lot of our coaches are doing conditioning work with kids now distanced out on the field. I don't know if you've been by Hall, Connor, seen it. It's great to see the kids out there, and getting some exercise, because that's, whether it's organized or not, getting kids outside and doing things is really important. And so I'm thankful to our coaches for doing that.
Great. I have a couple of questions. I just wanted to see if any other board members have any questions before I ask my two.
Go, Deb.
All right. And recognizing the time. My first question is it your expectation that the state will supply some sort of a metric soon that will help determine which plan we use to start the year, and then if something happens during the year?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, Deb. I certainly hope so. I mean, that's been, Dr. Matthew Carter has basically said a 5% positive rate is very concerning. The CDC says a 5% positive rate is the number where you're in difficult situation. Connecticut has been below 1%. Today it was 0.7% as far as the percentage of tests taken that are positive. So we're still in good shape there. Is that the metric they're going to use? Since Dr. Carter, the state epidemiologist, keeps talking about it, I think it very well may be, but I don't have a specific insight into that. And there's a couple different metrics that have come up. Frankly, we're putting in what the current CDC guidance is about quarantining, but if you talk to different health departments, you will get different answers about that. There needs to be some specifics about that. And Deb, I don't know if this is going to be your last question. I don't want to jump in, but we get asked about testing all the time. And why aren't we testing all of our kids and staff? And why aren't we testing our kids and staff weekly when they come back? I will say, I agree. I would love to. I think that's where we should be as a society. And I am hopeful, based on some of the doctors and epidemiologists I've talked to and Andy's talked to, that at some point we will have a test, a cheap spit test of some sort that is turnaround, quick, and we can do that. But to give people perspective, since this started, in West Hartford, there's been 8,807 total tests given. That's from the beginning till July 15th, 8,807 total tests. For one day for West Hartford Public Schools, we'd need over 11,000 tests for one day, and then to do it next week. And I know people think, well, they're free, you can go to CVS. We can't really send 11,000 people to CVS for a free test. Wholesale, you're talking, I don't know, Andy, I mean, he and I have heard $100 a test. That's $1 million a week. Yeah. So that part isn't feasible right now. It's another layer that frankly, I would love for parents to take their kids for a test within 14 days of the start of school. I'd love for teachers to do that for 14 days before the start of school. I can't mandate it, but it's part of how we work together. I don't know if that was going to be your question, but since
it was not, but thank you for addressing it. My final question is, you mentioned that once the plan is ready on Thursday or shortly thereafter, the schools will be pushing the plan out to parents and available in a variety of languages, I think you said. So I just wanted to kind of circle back to that and remind the public that they'll be getting this information from your school. It'll also be on the West Hartford Public Schools website, whps.org. So the question is, will there be some sort of a feedback loop or a way for families to reach out and ask questions and get those questions answered and or express concerns? And what is the best way for people to do that?
We think the best way for that right now is honestly with their principals at this point. And if it becomes so voluminous, I'm not trying to kill our principals, especially since I've been the one they've all come to for the past couple months. But I think that that's the best avenue. I think as we get questions, we keep adding to a frequently asked questions page. So in the report, there's a frequently asked questions. And one of the important thing about the report is that it's a live document. And those will continue to be added as we get those questions in all the time. And on the website will be a frequently asked questions page where you click on that question, you'll get the answer, and it can link to the place and report where it appears or to that school. So the feedback loop is honestly, we'd ask people to reach out and talk to the principal at this point. And again, if it needs to be, I'd love to say send it to this website and send it to this email box, but a general email box that 20 people are responsible for, nobody's really responsible for. So that's right now, we're hoping that it'll go through our principals next week, and that's the plan.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. And if you're still with us, thank you for sticking with us. Moving on, have we covered staff reports and board discussions? Yes? Okay, good. There are no routine matters. Under item 8, information and reports, board members, communications and reports from other boards and organizations. Does anyone have anything to report under this item? Okay, no other information and discussions. Moving to item 9, future business, announcement of future meeting dates. So our next 2 meetings at this point are scheduled for Tuesday, September 8th and Tuesday, September 22nd, both at 7 p.m. The agenda indicates that these will be virtual meetings. However, we would like to have these meetings in person if we are back in school in person. So location is to be determined, and we will provide the public with ample notice. Wherever the meeting is held, whether it's virtual or a town hall or at one of our schools or outside in a tent, we will make sure there's a way for the public to view the meeting just like you are tonight. So Tuesday, September 8th, and Tuesday, which is our first day of school now, and Tuesday, September 22nd. Are there any requests for future agenda items? Great. Comments from visitors. Are there visitors, members of the public who would like to make comments? If so, we are back to the 3 minutes per individual and 21 minutes per subject matter. All right, I'll take that as no comments. We do not have executive session, so I will take a motion to adjourn. Anyone?
So moved. Amanda.
I was going to say, somebody please.
Lorna, so moved.
And seconded by Lorna. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for all of your hard work, for your diligence, for your interest, and I know we'll all be in touch. Meeting is adjourned at 10:56. Everyone have a great night.